Chapter 11:18. Thump thump thump. After retreating 7 or 8 steps, the roaring tiger army and ultimate martial army soldiers stomped on the ground, a massive force bursting into the ground and instantly cracking it. At the same time they stabilized their bodies. Assemble! Another roar rang out. The moment the Revelation Army, Blood Beast Army, and Death Army attacked, all the roaring tiger army and ultimate martial army soldiers swiftly regrouped. Before the Revelation Army could reach them, they had already assumed defensive formations, their ranks tight. Buzz! The Revelation Army soldiers on horseback instantly paled at this sight. The Revelation Army's charging ability was unparalleled in the world. Once they were unable to stop their charge, only death awaited them. This was the first time the Revelation Army had seen the Roaring Tiger Army and the Ultimate Martial Army regroup so quickly after being scattered, not giving their opponents a single opportunity to strike. Not only that, although the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army seemed to have been suppressed in this charge, only 7 or 8 people had died. This result was simply unimaginable. It was truly all bark and no bite. Kill them! A moment later, the Revelation Army reacted. No matter how strong these two Tang Dynasty armies were, as long as they could not contend against the Revelation Army, only death awaited them. It was only a matter of time before they were slaughtered by the Revelation Army. Rumble! The earth once more began to quake. The Blood Beast Army, Death Army, and Revelation Army, the 3 supreme armies under Kataba's command, gathered together and surged toward the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army. Buzz! No one noticed that in the rear of the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army, the black armored guard waved the 9-dragon blood war banner. In a flash, the entire battlefield began to churn and change. Under the gazes of countless people, thunderclouds gathered, and streams of crimson light with a hint of gold in it swept out from the giant golden monument in the sky, instantly entering the bodies of the armies. A moment later, the entire formation began to move. Kill! Before the Revelation Army could charge over, a moment later, a wave of light shook, and a heaven-shaking battle cry came from the side. Kill them! Avenge our brothers! The 2,000 Xuanwu army soldiers gripped their swords, their eyes red as they charged into the midst of the Revelation Army, Death Army, and Blood Beast Army with thunderous speed. At such a close distance, not even the Heaven Enlightenment Army could defend in time. In the blink of an eye, the two armies collided fiercely. But this was only the beginning. The 2,000 soldiers of the Black Tortoise Army had no intention of lingering. After a fierce clash, the Black Tortoise Army, Roaring Tiger Army, and Ultimate Martial Army were driven away by the array. Boom! Another army arrived and struck the Revelation Army. However, in the next instant, this army also retreated. The Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Dragon Stallion Army, Iron Wall Army. These armies, supported by the 9-dragon blood war banner, charged at the Revelation Army one after another. Halos shook and the earth quaked. In the face of these dazzling attacks, even the Revelation Army was thrown into disarray. They had no idea who their opponents were, or which army they should pursue. At every moment, an army was retreating, and at every moment, an army was attacking from the rear. Once, twice, thrice, 4 times, in the face of these waves of attacks, even the Revelation Army found it somewhat difficult to endure. In a few short moments, the Revelation Army had been attacked 23 times. Boom! This powerful army was finally forced to retreat, its formation falling into chaos. At this moment, all the Revelation Army soldiers paled. Now, Wang Chong had been staring intently at the battlefield this entire time, and when he saw this sight, he immediately gave the most fatal order to the Revelation Army. Chiluo, go! Wang Chong suddenly turned his head and shouted at Chiluo, who was standing 20-some feet away. Although Chiluo was very dissatisfied with Wang Chong, and the Tongluo army had a grudge with Wang Chong, on this battlefield, Wang Chong was the highest commander. At this crucial moment, even Chiluo had to listen to Wang Chong's orders. 20-some feet away, Chiluo viciously glared at Wang Chong, and then looked away. Clang! He unsheathed his sword. Everyone follow me! Before he could finish speaking, the cavalry charged forward. Chiluo leading the several thousand Tongluo cavalry behind him like lightning bolts. Careful the Tongluo! The eyes of a Death Army officer constricted at the sight of the Tongluo charging forward. They had learned of the name of this army from Daluan Ruozan. As the personal guards of Taizong's era, the Tongluo were indisputable. Rumble! One Arab army after another tried to change directions to stop the Tongluo, but it was too late. In the blink of an eye, several thousand Tongluo cavalry in bronze armor pierced through the ranks of the Revelation Army like a sharp knife, stabbing into the ranks of the Revelation Army. Buzz! The moment the Tongluo cavalry struck the Revelation Army, Wang Chong waved his arm and gestured to the left, toward the 3,000-some Azure martial army personally trained by Tang Dynasty war god So Yong-sun. The next moment, the earth rumbled, and the Azure martial army charged out from behind the steel city walls like thunder. Their momentum was overwhelming, and it was extremely shocking. The Azure martial army had been the strongest force under the command of Tang Dynasty war god So Yong-sun. Although time had been short, and this army had not been able to truly reach the level of unstoppable might that had struck fear into the hearts of all the surrounding powers and empires. But it had already reached 60 to 70% of its former strength. Whoosh! When the last Azure martial army entered the battlefield, the black armored guard, who stood in the middle of the battlefield like a god, suddenly waved his war flag. Two enormous forces instantly gushed out and simultaneously enveloped the Tongluo Iron Cavalry in the distance, and the Azure martial army, which was the last to enter the battlefield. Whether it was the Tongluo Cavalry, the Azure martial army, or the Ultimate Martial Army, all of them had been created during the era of Tang Dynasty Taizong. The Dragon Stallion Army and Divine Martial Army seemed to have been created by Ansis Han and Geshu Han, but they had also inherited the training methods of the previous generation, originating from Taizong's era. As for the Divine Prison Army and Xuanwu Army, that Wang Chong had secretly trained, they had inherited the training methods of Taizong's era. After more than 100 years, the 9 strongest armies of the Tang Dynasty Taizong had gathered for the first time on the battlefield of Talas to the west of the Tsong Mountains, and the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, which had been in obscurity for more than 100 years, once more began to shine. Thunderclouds began to churn, and the power of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner instantly swelled the strength of these two already extremely powerful armies. Rumble! Rumble! Accompanied by an unprecedentedly loud rumble, the entire world seemed to be torn apart. In the face of the repeated attacks of the Divine Martial, Divine Prison, Roaring Tiger, and Ultimate Martial armies, as well as the attacks of the Tongluo Cavalry and Azure Martial Army, Kateba's Revelation Army was utterly routed. In Nei, war horses neighed as the Revelation Army soldiers panicked. For the first time, they felt like they were trapped in an ocean, completely powerless to resist. Break the sharpest part of the spear was one of the rules of war of the Revelation Army. This rule applied to all the opponents the Revelation Army had faced in the past, and it also applied to the Revelation Army itself. Bang! One of the Revelation Army soldiers was unable to dodge in time, and was instantly surrounded. In a short period of time, at least 6 or 7 swords that were as heavy as 10,000 caddies chopped down on his body. Even though the Revelation Army soldiers were extremely powerful, and Kateba had equipped them with the best equipment and armor, they still found it difficult to resist these destructive attacks. Aya! Aya! With a scream, a Revelation Army soldier vomited blood and collapsed to the ground along with his horse. Plush! As this Revelation Army soldier fell to the ground, a sword stabbed through his throat. A moment later, a silver boot stepped over his corpse and began to advance toward the other Revelation Army soldiers. 500, 600, 700, 1,000. In a few short moments, more than 1,000 Revelation Army soldiers had been slain. Not only that, as the Revelation Army soldiers fell, the Blood Beast Army and Death Army began to fall as well, sending a cloud of dust into the air. The Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, and the other 2 armies had 7 dazzling halos around them. With the addition of the Tongluo Cavalry and Azure Martial Army, the number of halos around them instantly rose from 7 to 9. The 9 top-class armies of the Tang dynasty, numbering more than 20,000 in total, swept toward the enemy. This time, it wasn't just the Revelation Army and Blood Beast Army. The Beheader Army, Tiber's Army, and the surrounding Arab cavalry were all within the range of the 9-dragon blood war banner. This time, the Arabs had truly been routed. Nay, on the battlefield, Arab horsemen screamed in fear as they fell to the ground. Blood rapidly filled the air, and to the west of Talas, rivers of blood flowed across the ground like a living hell. Fast. Too fast. Only a few moments had passed since the Tongluo cavalry had attacked, and the army had been routed. The Arab army was covered in casualties, and even the seemingly invincible Revelation army had suffered severe losses. Chapter 11:19. The Arabian Empire had gathered so many elites, 3 governors, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but it had still been routed by the 20,000 soldiers of a trifling empire of the Eastern world. From their vantage point, they could see that these elite Arab horsemen were being tossed into the air like ragdolls by the 20,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty. These Tang dynasty elites only needed to swing their swords to cleave the several thousand Jin Arab horsemen in two, or send them flying several dozen meters. Although the Arabs had the advantage in numbers, no amount of soldiers could stop the edge of the Tang people. The bodies of the Tang people were dazzling and resplendent, as if they were miniature formations. Their vibrations suppressed the radiance of all the other armies on the battlefield. No matter how many Arab cavalry charged at him, they were all thrown back like ants trying to shake a tree. Retreat! Pass on my order! All soldiers retreat! At this moment, even Abu Muslim's expression was extremely grim. Abu Muslim had never imagined that an army of more than 200,000 soldiers would be suppressed like this. Abu Muslim had predicted that the worst-case scenario would be a slight disadvantage, but for some reason, the situation was not as disadvantageous as he had imagined. It was a complete rout. If they did not retreat, the Arabs would suffer even greater losses. Abu Muslim was known as the governor of iron and blood, and he was famed for his aggressive and fierce assaults on the battlefield. He would never retreat until he had utterly crushed his opponent. But now the Arab morale was at rock bottom. If they did not retreat, the Arabs would not be able to endure the painful consequences. Gallop! Upon hearing Abu Muslim's order, one of the Arab horsemen quickly turned around and left. Wait a moment. Suddenly, an extremely cold and emotionless voice resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone trembled at this voice, and turned to look at Qutayba. Even Abu Muslim turned to look. The Blood Beast Army, the Death Army, and the Revelation Army were all soldiers under Qutayba's command. If there was one person who had suffered the greatest losses in this battle, it was the governor of war, Qutayba. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting for Qutayba's order. The 9-dragon blood war banner. Not far from the Arabs, Dalwan Ruozan suddenly spoke. What? Dalwan Ruozan's words caused all eyes to turn to him. That war banner is the 9-dragon blood war banner. Dalwan Ruozan repeated. His gaze swept over the distant space to that ancient war banner fluttering in the wind. More than 100 years ago, during the era of Taizong, the Tang dynasty, a war banner of the Tang dynasty was forged from deep-sea Xian metal and of star cores. This war banner could control 9 top-class armies and superimpose the halos of these armies, so that a single army could simultaneously possess 9 powerful halos. It was precisely with this war banner that the Tang dynasty was unstoppable on the battlefield, defeating the Turkic Khaganate and splitting it in two. At the same time, it defeated the Goguryeo Empire, the Mangshi Zhao Empire, the Shi, the Khitans, and even our Uzan. Only then did the legend of the Tang dynasty begin to flourish. It was also at that time that the Tang dynasty became publicly acknowledged as the strongest country on the continent. Dalwan Ruozan sternly said. Unlike the generals, Dalwan Ruozan's martial arts were far less profound, but he was well versed in the scriptures and knew the histories, stories, and even unofficial histories of the surrounding countries like the back of his hand. The glorious past of Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty had quietly faded into oblivion, so much so that not even the Tang dynasty itself knew much about it. But Daluan Ruozan had been able to gather some precious records of the Central Plains, including the records of that war from 100 years ago, to understand these matters like the back of his hand. The Nine-Dragon Blood War banner. There was no doubt that this was a powerful legend inseparable from the glory of the Tang dynasty's Taizong era, and it was also the true #1 artifact of the Tang dynasty. 9 of the strongest armies combined with the legendary Nine-Dragon Blood War banner would probably cause even the Revelation army to suffer a crushing defeat. The Arabs' defeat was completely within reason. The Tang people were no longer just an army content in a corner of the world. What was displayed before everyone was the most glorious and powerful army of the Tang dynasty. Their true appearance was far more powerful than what the crowd had seen, known, or imagined. In a flash, Daluan Ruozan's face turned extremely grave. With the banner of the Tang dynasty on the battlefield, the nature of this war had completely changed. If the records in that book are correct, we must seize the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner. Otherwise, the ground armies will have no chance of winning this war. Daluan Ruozan's gaze pierced through the vast army, immediately focusing on that muscular and giant-like figure standing in front of the steel walls, and the red and black war banner fluttering in the wind in his hand. Daluan Ruozan's eyes gradually turned sharp. Getting rid of the flag-bearer was their last hope of turning defeat into victory. Pass on my order. All soldiers retreat. Die. At the same time, after what seemed like both a second and countless eons, Kataba's icy voice resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone was flabbergasted by these words. No one had expected that even the Revelation army had been routed, but Kataba was still persisting, and that he wanted all the soldiers to defend to the death. But as the strongest existence on the Arab side, Kataba's orders were not something they could lightly defy. Kill that war banner, and everything will naturally come to an end. Kataba's voice resounded in everyone's ears. Top-class great generals had extremely sharp eyes, and although Kataba had never been to the Central Plains and knew nothing about the formations of the Central Plains, he had almost instantly reached the same conclusion as Daluan Ruozan. All fell silent. Kataba's words caused all eyes to turn to the battlefield. The sight of that massive red and black war banner fluttering in the wind instantly made the atmosphere subtly tense. Arabia had no such large-scale formations, but if everything was as Kataba said, perhaps they wouldn't even need to retreat. Clang! The clear cry of a sword resounded through the sky. While everyone else was still pondering Kataba's words, Kataba had already reached behind him in a blinding flash of golden light, grabbing that massive golden sword renowned throughout Arabia. Divine might! Gallop! Kataba's warhorse, Victor, began to gallop forward under everyone's gazes. In a flash, the Arab soldiers parted like waves, opening a path for Kataba. In the rear of the army, the morale that had been shaken by the defeat on the front lines and thrown into disarray by Kataba's appearance instantly calmed down. At any time, Kataba would always have an irreplaceable position in the Arab army. As long as Kataba was present, all the Arab soldiers would firmly believe that Arabia would never lose. Buzz! Looking at the sudden appearance of the golden figure in the distance, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Marquis, Kataba has made his move. A messenger turned to Wang Chong, his voice brimming with nervousness. The name of Kataba was far too intimidating for all the soldiers of the Tang dynasty. Even now, everyone still remembered how Kataba had single-handedly overturned more than 1,000 steel walls and suppressed 4 Tang dynasty great generals. Even though the Tang dynasty had the upper hand and was using the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner to completely crush the Arab army, no one dared to say that this formation could stop Kataba's attacks. No one spoke behind the steel walls, but the atmosphere was extremely tense. Chonger, leave this Kataba to me. At this moment, an elderly and vigorous voice resounded in Wang Chong's ear. Wang Chong saw a black blur out of the corner of his eye, and then a stalwart figure appeared in front of him. Master! Wang Chong was dazed for a moment, but then he immediately understood. The fierce winds caused the evil emperor's robes to flap in the wind and his long hair to dance in the wind. Wang Chong couldn't see the evil emperor's face, but he could see that his back was tall and straight, like a majestic mountain that exuded an imposing and firm aura. When Qutayba had ridden out from beneath the Black War banner, everyone had been a little uneasy, but the moment the evil emperor stepped out, all this unease and worry vanished. Even Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli had calmed down. Rumble! Qutayba's warhorse galloped faster and faster, the golden light on his body growing brighter and brighter. The enormous energy Qutayba was pouring into his warhorse made every step of the victor feel like a thunderclap. The moment the victor began to charge, the winds howled and all sound vanished. The only thing left on the earth was the thunderous galloping of the victor's hooves. It's Lord Qutayba! More and more Arab cavalry on the battlefield noticed this sight. 1, 2, 3, soon, the entire army had noticed and began to cheer. The cheers of Qutayba shook the heavens, instantly rousing the fallen morale. Qutayba! 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 Chapter 11:20. At this moment, even Dalo and Ruozan and the others couldn't help but raise their eyebrows, and the mood on the battlefield instantly became tense. Although the 20,000-some elite Tang soldiers still held the initiative and continued to destroy the charging Arab cavalry, the Arabs, who had been on the verge of collapse, had clearly regained their footing. Buzz! At this moment, the evil emperor's robe shook as he suddenly stepped forward. His expression was calm and unperturbed, as if this was not a fierce battlefield, but a leisurely stroll through a garden. The evil emperor did not move very quickly, and to be more accurate, he was very slow. But in the blink of an eye, he had already stepped out of the defense line and into the fierce battlefield. Bzzz! The air twisted, and the evil emperor reappeared 10 zhang away. Not even someone of Wang Chang's cultivation level had been able to see how he had vanished. Kill him! The sight of the unarmored and black-robed evil emperor made the 2 Arab horsemen believe that they had found their chance. Savage light in their eyes, they charged at the evil emperor from the left and right. But a moment later, when Ney was still several feet from the evil emperor, the 2 muscular and bursting with explosive power seemed to run into an invisible barrier and came to a sudden stop. Not only that, the 2 Arab horsemen on the left and right also seemed to be immobilized by the art of petrification. Their eyes could still move, and there was extreme fear in their deep pupils. However, their bodies were like statues, unable to move at all. As for the demonic emperor old man, he continued on his way as if he didn't see them, brushing past them. 1 step, 2 steps. The evil emperor had already vanished, but the 2 Arab horsemen were still unable to move. Hong, after an unknown amount of time, there were 2 consecutive earth-shattering booms. Suddenly, an unparalleled force shot out from their backs. This force was not colorless and transparent, but was as red as blood. Bang! Bang! The 2 of them fell heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of smoke and dust. They died on the spot. The demonic emperor old man's myriad spirit sea art had reached the pinnacle, reaching a level that ordinary people found difficult to comprehend. Even in death, these 2 Arab horsemen did not understand how the demonic emperor old man, who had never touched them, had managed to kill them. Boom! 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 As they traversed the hellish battlefield, Arab cavalry, unaware of the truth, roared and charged at them. But every time, before they could get close, they would hear a heaven-shaking explosion. At the same time, countless Arab cavalry would be thrown more than 100 meters into the air. But before they could even hit the ground, they were already dead. In front of a terrifying expert like the demonic emperor old man, these so-called elites of the Great Tang were far too weak. The evil emperor didn't even need to touch them to kill them easily. Even the distant great generals of the Arab and Yusang empires were moved by such a powerful display of strength. Where did this person come from? Even Qutayba is rather cautious around him. Ibak sternly said. Even now, he still remembered how Qutayba had single-handedly suppressed the Tang army when he first fought. If nothing unexpected had happened, the Arabs should have won back then, until this mysterious black-robed elder had appeared. For a powerful existence like Qutayba to not attack this black-robed elder, for a very long time, was simply inconceivable, given his personality. It had to be known that even in front of great generals like Abu Muslim and Ibak, Qutayba had never had a good expression. His style had always been extremely domineering, and it was almost impossible to make him stop in his anger. There was no doubt that this mysterious black-robed elder had reached a certain level of strength. I don't know. In the current situation, we can only trust in Kateba. If not even he can defeat that person, there's nothing we can do. Abu Muslim continued to stare ahead, not even turning his head. Before his voice faded away, he squeezed his horse's abdomen, and the horse immediately rode out from under the black war flag. Ziad Ibak, Osman, all of you heard what Kateba said just now. No matter what, seize that banner or kill that person. If we want to break the current situation, we must destroy the Tang people's formation. With these words, Abu Muslim pulled on the reins of his horse and vanished into the vast army. Yes, Ziad took in a deep breath, his expression turning extremely grave as he viciously glared at the top-class Tang dynasty army. As long as these Tang dynasty soldiers did not truly possess this level of cultivation, but relied on external tools, then even if they destroyed their formation, they could still turn defeat into victory. Huishi Wazong Dusong Mangpoch, get ready. Kateba and Abu Muslim have already entered the field. We will probably need to use our strength in this battle. At the same time nearby, Daluan Ruozan spoke, his azure robes fluttering in the wind. His eyes were profound, countless thoughts flitting through them. With the addition of those two mysterious elders, the Great Tang's situation had completely changed. The Arabs alone would find it very difficult to gain the upper hand in a battle between great generals. As allies with a common enemy and goal, it was time for Uzan to play his role. Understood. Huishi Wazong pressed his right hand against the saber at his waist as he took 2 steps forward. At the same time, Dusong Mangpoj rode forward. The mood on the battlefield was only getting more and more tense. Wang Chong, Qianli, leave Abu Muslim to me. The rest of you deal with the rest. At the same time, on the other end of the battlefield, Gao Xianji looked at Abu Muslim, his eyes flashing as he spoke. The void was silent. Both of them nodded in tacit understanding. Without any hesitation, Gao Xianji suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen and galloped forward. On the battlefield, the 20,000 some elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty had gathered around the 9-Dragon Blood War banner and were sweeping through the surrounding foes. The Tang dynasty still held the initiative on the battlefield, but even someone like Commander Chulu had noticed the massive shift in the battlefield. In the distance, Kateba and the evil emperor were getting closer and closer, the air growing more and more tense. 100 feet, 60 feet, 50 feet. When they were still around 20 feet from each other, the two of them stopped in unison. One was riding a mighty warhorse, like a god exiled to the mortal world, while the other was dressed in a wide-sleeved robe. Although he was not as dazzling as Kateba's, his imposing figure was like the most majestic mountain in the world, enough to make anyone shrink back at the sight of him. Their eyes reflected each other's figure, and neither of them moved. Buzz! Powerful auras burst out from the two of them like tsunamis and landslides. Although the two of them did not make a move, everyone could feel the dangerous atmosphere. The surrounding soldiers had already unknowingly retreated like the tide, leaving a large empty space around the two of them. Kill! After some time, the Arab horsemen began to howl and charge from all sides, their scimitars swinging. For Lord Governor! Kill this Tang people! Shouts and shouts in Arabic resounded over the battlefield. Kateba had extremely high prestige in the army, and the Arab cavalry almost instinctively sensed an opportunity when they saw that the two were locked in a stalemate. They wanted to use their advantage in numbers to attack the evil emperor and create an opportunity for Kateba. At this sight, the demonic emperor old man finally moved, but it was only a slight twitch of his brow. His hands remained motionless at his sides. Boom! When they were still 3 feet from the evil emperor suddenly unleashed thousands of bolts of energy that crisscrossed in the air around him. Swish, swish, swish. Before these elite Arab cavalry could even reach the evil emperor, they were pierced through by those bolts of energy. Their powerful armor, made by the best Arab craftsmen, was like paper in the face of those bolts of energy, instantly pulverizing and shattering. Buzz! At this moment, a dreadful killing intent flashed through the air. Kateba, seated on his victor, had clenched his 5 fingers and was ready to strike. Boom! A streak of golden sword chi rose from the ground in an instant, piercing through the void. At this moment, even the sky seemed to be cleaved in two by this sword, leaving a long mirror-like scar in the sky. Only now did the thunderous boom of the attack come from the sky. Kataba's attack was swift and heavy to the extreme. If this sword were to fall, a mountain or a fortress would be cleaved in two, much less a person's body of flesh and blood. The moment Kataba attacked, the demonic emperor old man finally struck. In the face of Kataba's mountain-cleaving attack, the demonic emperor old man did not use any weapon, only thrust out his bloody palm. In the blink of an eye, something strange happened. Boom! Under the gazes of countless people, the void exploded, sending out thousands of powerful shockwaves. In the blink of an eye, thousands of bolts of energy appeared around the evil emperor's body. These bolts of energy varied in length, but together, they formed an enormous forest of energy that surrounded the evil emperor. If one looked carefully, one would see that almost every pore on the evil emperor's body was spitting out bolts of energy. Buzz! The demonic emperor old man's expression was solemn. With a wave of his finger, the thousands of bolts of energy gathered into a massive sword that slammed into Kataba's sword chi. Rumble! Chapter 1121. Ah! Screams filled the air as all the Arab cavalry within several hundred jang of the clash between the evil emperor and Kataba were instantly dealt a destructive blow. The shockwaves from their clash swept away all the Arab cavalry in the area, like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Thousands of Arab cavalry were sent flying through the air, their faces stricken with fear as they were swept away like rag dolls. Some of them were even sent flying into the distance, their bodies unable to stop themselves from crashing into the ground. Thud thud thud. In just a short period of time, the rocks on the ground cracked and blood gushed out like a waterfall. Countless warriors howled miserably as they were turned into cold corpses in the battle between the two of them, scattered all over the ground like stars in the sky. In the middle of the battlefield, not only did the billowing smoke and dust not calm down, it became even thicker, wave after wave shooting up into the sky. Within the dense smoke and dust, two figures, one gold and one black, were rapidly entangled as they engaged in an intense battle. Boom boom boom. Golden bolts of sword chi cleaved through the earth, piercing through the clouds. At the same time, innumerable sharp bolts of energy, even more terrifying than actual swords and sabers, were also exploding. Strength on the level of the evil emperor and Kataba had far surpassed the imagination of mortals. Even the imperial great generals, who stood at the apex of martial artists, couldn't help but tremble in fear at this sight, a feeling of inferiority rising up in their hearts. Pooh! In the blink of an eye, a gigantic storm formed from golden sword chi, myriad spirit sea arch chi, dust, and sand rapidly appeared before everyone's eyes, spiraling into the sky. Bang bang bang. Wave after wave of explosions rose and fell, turning this area into the most dangerous area. Retreat! Retreat! The Arab cavalry panicked and pulled on their reins as they fled into the distance. These two, how could this be? At this moment, even his allies, Huashu Wazong and Dusong Mangpoj, couldn't help but clench their fists in deep shock. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have found it very difficult to imagine that this battle had reached this level. Although they were both great generals, Kataba and the mysterious elder were clearly far stronger than they could comprehend. While the entire battlefield was shocked by the two of them, on the other side of the battlefield, a tall and sturdy figure rode over on a horse. Gao Xianji, we meet again. Do you think that you can stop me? When they were still several dozen feet away, Abu Muslim pulled on the reins and spoke in the language of the Tang dynasty. The two were old rivals, and it had been 4 months since this stalemate began. Abu Muslim had a rather good understanding of Gao Xianji. But you've already lost. Gao Xianji faintly smiled. The Revelation Army had already been defeated, as had the Death Army and Fearless Army. If everything went as expected, the Tang dynasty would emerge victorious in the end. Haha. To borrow the words of you Central Plains people, it's still unknown who will emerge victorious. Abu Muslim grinned. Moreover, you're no match for me. This was not their first clash. Since Gao Xianji had been no match for him in the past, he was naturally no match for him now. It was simply impossible for Gao Xianji to rely on his own strength to stop him. Haha, since you know a few proverbs of the Central Plains, I'll give you a few words of advice. Don't laugh too early until the very end. Gao Xianji faintly smiled. He had heard this saying from Wang Chong. The one who laughs last laughs best. Buzz! Abu Muslim's eyes chilled at these words, and a terrifying killing intent exploded out of him. Without the slightest hesitation, Abu Muslim put on the special eye of the demon god glove and punched. Asmodee's fury. Without the slightest hesitation, Abu Muslim immediately used the supreme art of the 72 demon god pillar art. When Abu Muslim had used this technique with the eye of the demon god, even the consecrated under Wang Chong's control had been forced to stagger, much less anyone else. Abu Muslim might not be as strong as Qutayba, but there was no question that he was one of the best. At the very least, the number of people on the side of the Tang dynasty who could compare to him could be counted on one's fingers. Rumble! The sky suddenly darkened, and then Abu Muslim's body vanished, replaced by a purple and black armored demon god with 3 heads. This demon god stood on the ground and punched a mountainous fist at Gao Xianji. This unstoppable punch had stirred up a fierce gale, for a radius of 100 zhang. Bang bang bang. The Arab corpses on the ground were thrown into the air by this fierce gale of energy and sent flying backward. Ha! Gao Xianji's eyes flashed, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. 8. G. Bang! Crack! Art! Gao Xianji's loud voice resounded in everyone's ears, each word like a peal of thunder. A moment later, as Abu Muslim stared in shock, the wind blew and he vanished. Rumble! A second later, in the sky several dozen zhang from where Gao Xianji had been standing, blazing bolts of lightning crackled as Gao Xianji's body appeared. Around him, light and shadow fluctuated, revealing 8 huge pitch-black pillars. The surface of the 8 pillars was engraved with mysterious ancient inscriptions, and in the center of the 8 mysterious ancient pillars, the void distorted. In the blink of an eye, a miniature topography of the entire continent was revealed. At first glance, everyone could sense a thick and boundlessly powerful aura. It was as if it wasn't just light and shadow, but was connected to the entire earth. The 8 ultimate sunderings art was a technique that Wang Chong had given him, and it had been born out of Gao Xianji's own 6 ultimate majesties god art. The 2 came from the same source. When one reached a certain level in martial arts, one would no longer be restricted by the transformation of one's weapon. For example, Wang Chong could use a sword, but he could also use a spear, a pike, and when he transformed into the god King Yama, he could also use a Vajra pestle. Gao Xianji's 6 ultimate majesties god art was primarily based on sword chi, but now that it had been upgraded to the 8 ultimate sunderings art, there was no longer any need for weapons. But although this supreme art was powerful, it was also extremely difficult to cultivate. At the very least, Gao Xianji had comprehended this theory, but he had never been able to cultivate it. Although Wang Chong had given him a month to cultivate in seclusion, Gao Xianji had never been able to fully cultivate it. Not long ago, when the evil emperor had arrived, Gao Xianji had asked him about the essence of qi, and only then had he completely comprehended this even more powerful 8 ultimate sunderings art. Do you think that you can fight against me like this? Abu Muslim's eyes chilled, and a moment later, the Asmodee's fury that Abu Muslim had just fired suddenly changed directions and shot toward Gao Xianji. At almost the same time, Gao Xianji spread open his fingers, sending 8 black pillars of inscription flying through the air toward Abu Muslim's left, and right. When Abu Muslim's Asmodee's fury was still several dozen feet from Gao Xianji, Abu Muslim's strongest attack suddenly froze in the air. How could this be? Abu Muslim was flabbergasted by this sight. His fist energy and technique were formless and invisible. Unless they were sabers or swords, they should have been impossible to grasp. For Gao Xianji to be able to freeze his fist energy in the air was completely beyond Abu Muslim's understanding and inconceivable. As this thought flitted through Abu Muslim's mind, the 8 black pillars of inscription suddenly exploded with power. There was a heaven-shaking boom as Abu Muslim's full-strength punch was suddenly shattered by a terrifying energy and completely obliterated. Fierce winds blew down from the sky, and Abu Muslim paled at this sight. He had never imagined that Gao Xianji would be able to cultivate a new technique in just 1 month, and that he would be able to use these 8 strange pillars to completely shatter his strongest attack. Abu Muslim, that was then, and this is now. No matter what you want to do, as long as I am here, you will never succeed. A loud and clear voice came from the sky like rolling thunder. Gao Xianji stepped out. At the same time, a majestic sword qi burst out from his feet. The sword qi condensed and quickly turned into another black pillar of inscriptions. It floated in the air and supported Gao Xianji's body at the same time. The sky was a forbidden zone for martial artists, but to Gao Xianji, it was like walking on flat ground. With this step, Gao Xianji's understanding of the 8 ultimate sunderings art deepened. Martial path, sword qi, and all sorts of rules were integrated in his mind. In an instant, a tremendous aura surged, like a storm, exploding from his body. Gao Xianji, who was already very strong to begin with, instantly broke through some sort of bottleneck and reached an even higher level. Gao Xianji finally had the right to directly face Abu Muslim. All was silent. Abu Muslim looked up at Gao Xianji in the sky, sensing the rising energy coming from his body, and his face instantly turned steely and nasty. Huashu was on go. Daluan Ruozen's eyes flashed when he saw that Qutayba and Abu Muslim had been stopped, and he immediately gave the order. This battle was not just related to Arabia, but also to Uzan. No matter what, they had to defeat the Tang dynasty. And if they wanted to destroy the Tang dynasty's 9 dragon blood formation, they needed an imperial great general. Understood? Chapter 1123. Chong'er, leave Huashu Wuzong to me. A dignified and vigorous voice came from behind him. At some point, Wang Yan had appeared at Wang Chong's side. As he gazed at the approaching Huashu Wuzong, a sharp light flashed through his eyes. Before Wang Chong could reply, Wang Yan immediately strode out from behind the first defense line. Behind him, there were tens of thousands of infantrymen in strict formation, following closely as they stepped out together. Wang Chong, I'm going to help General Wang, Su Hanshan sternly said as he walked up to Wang Chong and stared at Wang Yan's back. Wang Yan was Wang Chong's father, and although Su Hanshan had no doubts about Wang Yan's strength, there was no harm in being cautious. Dispatching 5,000 ballista soldiers would be able to intimidate the Arab cavalry. This was especially true now that the Tang dynasty had taken the initiative. With the 9 dragon blood war banner and the 5,000 ballista soldiers, this massive system of warfare would only get stronger and stronger, and its ability to intimidate the Arabs would only get stronger and stronger. Wang Chong assessed the situation and nodded. The opportunity had come. Although the Tang dynasty had been on the defensive throughout the Battle of Talas, relying on its long steel defense line to await an attack, the opportunity to counterattack had come. The Tang dynasty no longer needed to defend, and could attack instead of defend. Creak, creak. With a clatter of gears, the 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae under Su Hanshan's command passed through the gaps in the steel walls, and followed Wang Yan's infantry. Release! Before the other Arab cavalry could charge, Su Hanshan waved his arm, sending 5,000 ballista bolts flying over Wang Yan's army, past the 9 dragon blood war banner, and the 20,000 some elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty, and into the Arab cavalry. Plush plush plush. Countless Arab cavalry screamed as they were pierced through by the sharp ballista bolts and dropped to the ground. Forward! With a wave of his sword, Su Hanshan led the army forward, pushing the ballistae past the corpses. The 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae in his hands formed a hedgehog formation. Although the ballista army's defensive power was very low, considering that Su Hanshan had trained these soldiers to be brigands and highwaymen, if the ballista army were to break through their defenses, they would suffer grievous casualties. But in Su Hanshan's hands, even the most elite army of the Tang dynasty would find it extremely difficult to cross the range of the ballistae. The sharp attack itself was the best defense. Fan formation. Traversing through space and arriving near the 9-dragon blood battle formation, Su Hanshan waved his sword and issued another order. 5,000 Tang Dynasty ballistae poured out like water, perfectly encompassing the 9-dragon blood formation and the infantry formation led by Wang Chang's father, Wang Yan. Together, the three armies formed a compact and powerful system, even though Su Hanshan's strength was still far from reaching that level. In terms of strategy, Su Hanshan had already revealed the qualities of a future great general. Gallop! Wang Yan did not pay attention to the changes behind him. Looking at that familiar figure, he suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen and urged it forward. Wang! There was a flash of light, and in the process of advancing, Wang Yan suddenly disappeared. In his place was a deep black light that burst forth and rapidly expanded. Roar! There was a heaven-shaking roar, and in the blink of an eye, a massive golden-armored god appeared on the battlefield. With a single step, he covered 10-some meters as he strode toward Huashu Huaitsang. The aura exuded by the golden-armored god was extremely powerful, and his massive body dwarfed all the great Tang elites on the battlefield, like fireflies before the bright moon, insignificant. On the other side, Huashu Huaizong raised his brows at the sight of the mighty miracle god and the rumbling of the earth. He immediately used the Vairocana Buddha golden body mantra. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic Buddha appeared on the battlefield, its entire body bursting with a golden light. It was as mighty as hell. As he stared at the distant Wang Yan, Huashu Huaitsang's entire body exploded with a heaven-shaking fighting intent, and he quickened his pace as he charged forward. At almost the same time, Wang Yan's eyes flashed with cold light as he controlled the mighty miracle god to quicken its pace. Rumble! 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 The two mortal enemies of the southwest had once more met on the foreign battlefield of Talas. One viewed Huashu Huaizong as a long-term threat to the Tang dynasty, an invader, the creator of calamity, and a powerful imperial great general. The other vowed to wash away the humiliation of the southwest. Rumble! A moment later, the entire world seemed to tear apart. As countless people watched, Huashu Huaizong and Wang Yan, one gold and one black, two enormous figures collided on the battlefield. In a flash, winds howled, sand flew, and pebbles flew as a peerless shockwave shook the entire battlefield. In the distance, Dalawan Ruozan almost imperceptibly creased his brow at this sight. He had been paying attention to Huashu Huaizong this entire time, but based on the situation on the battlefield, it was clear that Huashu Huaizong would not be able to defeat Wang Yan in the short term. Dusong Mangpo Jugo? Dalawan Ruozan suddenly said without turning his head. Dusong Mangpo said nothing, his eyes fixed on the place where the evil emperor and Kataba were fighting, his fists clenched, his eyes flashing with light. I know what you're thinking, but now is not the time. Acting rashly will only waste all our efforts. Dalawan Ruozan sternly said. Understood. Dusong Mangpo took in a deep breath, and finally calmed his mind. He urged his horse forward and galloped toward the 9-dragon blood war banner, his armor clattering as he brushed past Dalawan Ruozan and vanished into the distance. Bastard! The leader of the Mamelukes, Ibak, was also watching the battlefield. As Kataba, Abu Muslim, and Huashu Huaizong were stopped by the Tang dynasty, Ibak's expression was cold, his eyes brimming with killing intent. Hear my order. All soldiers move out. I don't believe that there's a formation that my Mamluk army can't break. Ibak clicked his fingers together as he grabbed a nearby warhorse and mounted it. Clang! Ibak's right leg lightly kicked against the back of his horse. There was a metallic clatter as an enormous halo exploded from Ibak's foot and spread to the feet of all the Mamelukes. Pharaoh Halo. This dazzling dark red halo was ancient and powerful, and in Ibak's hands, it was more than twice as powerful as Faisal's. Clang clang clang. The power of this supreme Pharaoh halo caused the defense, speed, and dexterity of the Mamluk army to rapidly rise. Ibak's eyes were as sharp as knives as he glared at the distant 9-dragon blood war banner. With a wave of his sword, more than 4,000 Mamelukes exploded forward like a torrent of mercury. Clang! Not long after Ibak moved out, Ziad took in a deep breath, took out the ocean ring, and mounted a warhorse. I'd like to see just how much ability you have, and just how many of us you can stop. Ziad was also infuriated. The Arabs were proud and confident. This battle was no longer just about the strategic fortress of the Silk Road. It was also a clash of momentum, strength and confidence between Arabia and the Tang dynasty, between the West and the East. No matter what, Arabia could not lose to these countries of the East. Ney and Ziad rode forward, leaving a trail of dust in their wake, as they vanished from beneath the black Arabian war banner, and into the roiling battlefield. Ziad has moved out. Leave this person to me. Cheng Qianli suddenly pulled out his sword with a clang, and looked into the distance. His eyes had been focused this entire time, and he had noticed Ziad the moment he moved out. The two of them had fought more than once, and Cheng Qianli knew Ziad's martial arts and fighting style like the back of his hand. There was no better candidate to capture Ziad than him. Wang Chong nodded, and turned his head to look at Ibak, and the 7,000 Mamelukes charging over, as well as the Celestial Wolf Cavalry, and Mutri Great Cavalry, who had noticed the change in the situation and followed. In yesterday's battle, the Mutri Great Cavalry and Celestial Wolf Cavalry had suffered the greatest losses. Although they were also top-class cavalry, the weapons and equipment of the Mutri Great Cavalry and Celestial Wolf Cavalry were far inferior to those of the Mamelukes and Wuxian Cavalry, which was why they had suffered such heavy losses. But even so, the three armies added together still had an astonishing number of 12,000 soldiers. Wuxian Cavalry, hear my order. Follow me. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with cold light, as he immediately gave the order. Ibak had already begun to move, and under the power of his halo, the strength of the 7,000 Mamelukes swelled to an astonishing level. This was the true Pharaoh halo. Cui Piaoqi and Banahan alone would not be able to stop it. Let us see whether the true Pharaoh halo is stronger, or the Azura Hell formation is stronger. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with intense light as he urged his horse forward, galloping out from beneath the Tang Dynasty war banner. Chapter 1124. Awa. The temperature in a radius of several thousand zhang plummeted as cold winds swept through the world. Without any warning, everyone heard a heaven-shaking howl, like countless vengeful spirits writhing and screaming in the depths of hell. Anyone who heard this sound would feel an intense fear that came from the depths of their hearts. Clop, clop, clop. The dense sounds of horse hooves were as heavy as thunder. They quickly moved from the first defense line to the battlefield in the distance. In the churning dust, Wang Chong led all the Wuxian cavalry forward like a comet, unstoppable and unstoppable, as they charged toward Ibak, and the strongest cavalry of the three empires. Daluan Ruozhen had been paying close attention this entire time. As he watched Wang Chong lead the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry in a charge that was not one bit inferior to the cavalry of the three great empires, a hint of deep concern flashed through his eyes. Uzhen had no path of retreat. The Arabs had invested so many soldiers that victory was inevitable. No matter what, they had to destroy the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, destroy the greatest reliance of the Tang people. But Uzhen had sent out all his generals, and the three empires did not have many great generals left. Other than Governor Osman of Cairo, who was nervously watching the battle and ready to move at any moment, there was only one person left. Ha ha ha. It seems like I'm the only one left in this battle. Suddenly, Daluan Ruozhen roared with laughter. Before Daluan Ruozhen could speak, Duwu Sili seemed to have predicted what Daluan Ruozhen was going to say and galloped forward. Daluan Ruozhen was stunned, momentarily speechless. Duwu Sili had always been a crafty individual. If he could hide until the very end, he would never strike first. Moreover, his every move had a clear goal in mind. But now, before he could say anything, Duwu Sili had come forward. This had truly taken him by surprise. For the first time, Daluan Ruozhen found himself unable to grasp Duwu Sili's goal. But no matter what Daluan Ruozhen thought, Hiya! A bellow resounded in Duwu Sili's ear, followed by the clattering of hooves. His glossy black steed brushed past Daluan Ruozhen and entered the fierce battlefield. It seems like I have to go. The only person behind the defense line who had not yet moved was Chief of Wuxiang. Although the Chief of Wuxiang was powerful, he was still very old, much older than his master, the evil emperor. This was why Wang Chong had arranged for him to come last. Although he was powerful in martial arts, the chief of Wuxiang was not good at leading troops in battle. At least, it was impossible for the chief of Wuxiang to lead the Wuxiang Iron Cavalry in a charge. Therefore, in the end, only the chief of Wuxiang could deal with Dewisili. The chief of Wuxiang's white walking stick paused and immediately walked out from behind the first defense line. Boom! In the blink of an eye, just as the chief of Wuxiang walked out from behind the gaps in the defense line, a strong wind suddenly howled. A destructive force suddenly shot toward the chief of Wuxiang like lightning. Boom! In the blink of an eye, it collided heavily with the chief of Wuxiang's righteous chi. At that moment, everyone could clearly see that the arrow shooting at the Wuxiang village chief was a specially made arrow as thick as a finger and more than 5 feet long. The arrow streaked through the void, leaving a white scar that was more than 20 meters long behind it. It took a long time for the arrow to heal. From this, one could see that the person who had struck the arrow had reached an inconceivable level of strength. But even more astonishing was the change that occurred after the arrow struck the chief of Wuxiang. As everyone watched, that 5-foot-long arrow seemed to encounter an unprecedented obstacle in the air. The arrow froze in the air, unable to advance even an inch. Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, under the gazes of countless people, the 5-foot-long arrow began to break inch by inch, starting from the arrowhead. In the blink of an eye, the arrow forged from deep-sea Xian iron had been reduced to powder. Even in the end, the arrow had failed to get within 3 feet of the chief of Wuxiang. Buzz! Countless high-ranking Arab Uzan and Western Turkic generals were stunned by this sight. This white-haired elder of the Tang dynasty was over 70 years old and was leaning on a cane. It seemed like he could collapse at any moment. No one had expected him to be so powerful that he could block a 3-foot-long arrow with just the stellar energy around his body. The chief of Wuxiang said nothing, only raised his head and looked at Shamshak. Shamshak was also stunned. He had never imagined that this old man would be so terrifying. Even though he was a brigadier general, this arrow had failed to even wound him. Ha! The chief of Wuxiang softly sighed, and then he extended a finger out of his sleeve and flicked it. Pa! Not far from the chief of Wuxiang's feet, a halberd stabbed into the corpses of several Arab horsemen suddenly shot through the air. As if pulled by some invisible energy, it shot toward Shamshak. Not good. The chief of Wuxiang had just raised his hand when Shamshak barely saw his sleeve shake. He didn't even know what exactly he had done. A moment later, Shamshak felt his scalp go numb and his body go numb from extreme danger. There was no time to think. Shamshak's body leaned back, and in the blink of an eye, he tumbled off the back of his horse in a rather wretched manner. Boom! The moment Shamshak tumbled off his horse, a broken halberd brushed past the back of his horse and slammed into the army behind Shamshak. In an instant, there was an earth-shattering sound as the halberd landed on the ground, triggering a series of intense explosions. Several dozen Arab cavalry didn't even have time to grunt before they were blown to pieces. Even their armor and scimitars had been pulverized into powder. Shamshak broke out in a cold sweat. Killing several dozen Arab horsemen in a single blow was no problem for him, but pulverizing their tough armor was impossible. If he hadn't reacted so quickly and rolled off his horse, he would already be a corpse. Nay, as Shamshak breathed a sigh of relief, he suddenly heard the screech of a dying warhorse. Shamask was startled and subconsciously turned his head, only to see that tall and sturdy warhorse that had accompanied him for 10-some years topple to the ground with a thud. And its back had disappeared at some point. Shamshak's face instantly turned ghastly pale. But no matter what Shamshak was thinking, there was a flash of light in the distance. Gallop! Gallop! Using the celestial wolf's divine procession, Dewisili strode through the air like a storm as he charged toward the 9-dragon blood war banner and the chief of Wuxiang. His heroic aura, his black cloak flapping in the wind, and his sharp eyes were enough to make anyone with a weak will tremble in fear and dread. Young friend, stop! As Dewisili was charging into the distance, a white-haired figure leaning on a cane suddenly appeared in front of Dewisili. No one knew how the chief of Wuxiang had appeared, but he seemed to have encountered no obstacles in his path. Even the Arab cavalry behind him were dumbfounded, not knowing what was going on. The celestial wolf great general Wuxia was famous throughout the Western Turks and the Central Plains, but in the mouth of the chief of Wuxiang, he was just a young friend. In terms of age, Wuxia truly was much younger than him. Across from the chief of Wuxiang, Wuxia rode his black Turkic steed through the air. The winds howled as the mane of Wuxia's horse danced in the wind, and even Wuxia's hair danced in the wind. An enigmatic and wicked smile appeared on Wuxia's lips as he stared at the chief of Wuxiang. The chief of Wuxiang narrowed his eyes. Just when he believed that Wuxia was about to unleash some powerful move, the situation suddenly changed. Boom! Before the chief of Wuxiang could react, Wuxia shot into the air like a bolt of lightning, drawing a massive arc through the air as he charged toward the rear. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished from the battlefield. This, even though the chief of Wuxiang had weathered many storms, and had long since passed the age when he would be easily swayed by external forces, he was still left dumbfounded by this sight. Wuxia had come with such a heroic air, that the chief of Wuxiang had mentally prepared himself for a major battle. He had never expected that Wuxia would flee without a fight. What is Wuxia doing? At that moment, not only the chief of Wuxiang, but even the adjutant next to Dalawan Ruozan was dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. Dalawan Ruozan did not say anything. His brows were also furrowed. It doesn't matter what Wuxia does. Whether he flees or fights, he has already achieved his goal. Dalawan Ruozan pondered for a moment and suddenly said, The adjutant was instantly stunned. In the distance, the chief of Wuxiang had yet to understand what Wuxia was up to when an anxious shout suddenly rang through the battlefield. Oh no! It's Governor Osman of Cairo. Chapter 1125. In the distance, a stalwart figure had suddenly appeared in front of the 9-dragon blood war banner. This man had a body as muscular as a bear. He had been concealing his aura and hiding in the crowd this entire time, so that no one would notice him. Only now did he fiercely erupt with his energy. Not good. The chief of Wuxiang's mind froze as he realized what was going on. Wuxia hadn't been afraid or fleeing. He had been luring the tiger away from the mountain. This was because his goal had never been to fight him, but to lure him away. Buzz! Without the slightest hesitation, the chief of Wuxiang turned his head and began to fly away. The chief of Wuxiang was far from the only one to notice this change on the battlefield. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, and everyone else also noticed. But it was too late. Osman had moved even earlier than Wuxia. Before Wuxia had even entered the fray, Governor Osman had already vanished from beneath the Black Nile War banner by a hair's breadth. Wuxia had succeeded in attracting the attention of the chief of Wuxiang, and Osman had succeeded in concealing his aura and approaching the 9-dragon blood war banner. A bunch of ants. Once I seize this banner, I'd like to see how you'll resist. Governor Osman rode his black Arabian steed, his beard trembling in the wind as he exuded a vigorous aura. No matter how many tricks the Tang dynasty had up its sleeves, no matter how many ritual tools they had, the West would prevail over the East, and in the end, Arabia would be the final victor. Stop him! Don't let him get close! Anxious roars shook the heavens and earth. Seeing Governor Osman suddenly appear like a ghost, the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Roaring Tiger Army, everyone's expressions changed. In an instant, countless soldiers brandished their swords and charged at Governor Osman from all directions like a tidal wave. General Wang, General Du, let's join forces. We can't let him threaten the war flag. Sensing the unfathomably terrifying aura emanating from Osman, Zhao Fengxian's expression immediately changed. In terms of cultivation, this imperial great general had undoubtedly reached an extremely high level. Even in the palace of the Tang dynasty, he was not inferior to the 3 commanders of the imperial army. In that instant, Zhao Fengxian felt an unprecedented sense of danger. Boom! Without any hesitation, Zhao Fengxian clasped his hands together, grasped the earth's scar, and executed his strongest technique. Fury of Thunder! Moon-devouring greedy wolf! White Tiger supports the heavens. Almost at the same time, Greedy Wolf battled General Wang Sili, Roaring Tiger Army Du Wuwei, and several other captains abandoned their respective opponents and flew toward Governor Osman. All sorts of powerful techniques bombarded Osman like a thunderstorm. Ignorant. In the face of this vast sea of top-class soldiers of the Tang dynasty, as well as Zhao Fengchen, Wang Sili and Du Wuwei, Osman only shot them a disdainful glance. No matter how powerful his opponent was, even the strongest brigadier general, as long as they had not broken through to that level, they could not truly contend against an imperial great general. In the next moment, without any hesitation, a massive destructive force erupted from his body like a storm. Calamity of the Crocodile. In a flash, Osman used one of his most powerful techniques. In an instant, the space behind him changed, and a black flood appeared where Osman was standing. And in the middle of this mighty black torrent, two fierce eyes suddenly opened. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, a huge crocodile, more than 100 feet long, suddenly woke up from its slumber. The god of the Nile. This was the most revered god in all of Cairo and all of Egypt. It was rumored that every year, from the 3rd to the 6th month, this god of the Nile would awaken and unleash a vast flood that would inundate tens of thousands of acres of fertile land and houses. Osman's calamity of the crocodile had been created from this essence. Once Osman used this technique, it would be like the waters of the Nile, endlessly surging in wave after wave. Moreover, this energy was brimming with destructive energy. Osman had used this technique to kill countless top-class experts in his war with the Sassanid dynasty, and the energy had even pulverized their armor. Bang! This one move caused screams to ring out. In front of Osman's unstoppable flood of black energy, countless soldiers of the ultimate martial army, Divine Prison Army, Roaring Tiger Army, were sent flying. Even with the support of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner and the 9 halos, in front of a top-class imperial great general like Osman, all his attacks and defenses were laughable and feeble. Zhao Fengchen, Wang Sili, Du Wuwei, and the others were only able to last for a few moments before they were sent flying by Osman's mountain-toppling attack. Plush. While still in the air, the 3 of them vomited blood, their faces as pale as paper. Osman's palm had heavily wounded their ribs. Everyone hear my order. Charge with me. Osman's eyes flashed with cold light. His palm strike had torn a hole in the 9 Dragon Blood formation, but he didn't immediately chase after Zhao Fengchen, Du Wuwei, Wang Sili and the others. Instead, he gathered his troops and had them charge in with him. The Arabs still had many top-class soldiers around the 9 Dragon Blood formation, including the Revelation Army, the Blood Beast Army, and the Death Army. These were all forces that Osman could use. On the battlefield, the Arabs, Uzan and Western Turks still had the advantage in numbers. Osman's mind was extremely calm. The goal of this battle was not to kill or injure the Tang dynasty, but to destroy the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. Only by destroying this war banner would the Tang dynasty's formation collapse, making it impossible for it to threaten the Arab soldiers. Buzz! Osman's eyes reflected the giant red and black war flag. The moment he blasted through the gap, Osman didn't hesitate to shoot out like lightning towards the center of the formation, where the black armored guard stood motionless. Release! Su Hanshan suddenly shouted. He had sensed the danger up ahead, and had the Tang dynasty ballistae attack Governor Osman. His expression was cold and aloof, his eyes devoid of emotion. The battlefield was constantly changing, and the situation was extremely complex. More importantly, Osman had relied on his formidable strength to break into the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. He was surrounded by Tang soldiers, and at such a close distance, recklessly using the Tang ballistae would not only fail to kill his foe, but also wound his own men. A normal person would never have dared to use the Tang dynasty ballistae at a time like this. But not only had Su Hanshan used them, he had done so without the slightest hesitation, seeking death. As the Tang dynasty ballistae howled toward him, Osman's eyes turned cold and callous. Osman made no attempt to dodge Su Hanshan's ballistae, choosing to meet them head-on. Boom! An enormous energy exploded from Osman's body. The invincible Tang dynasty ballistae, which had the ability to pierce through stellar energy, were actually sent flying by the tyrannical energy in Osman's body. Su Hanshan couldn't help but grimace at the sight of all the ballistae being sent flying by Osman. But at this moment, it was too late for Su Hanshan to do anything. Osman had already succeeded in breaking through the heavy defenses, and was only several zhang from the black armored guard. For someone of Su Hanshan's cultivation level, to be able to launch a round of attacks against this top-class Imperial Great General was already quite impressive. A second round of attacks was impossible. Now hand over the war banner and die for me. Finally arriving in front of the black armored guard, Osman revealed a grim smile as he looked at the flag bearer in the middle of the formation core. It was as if he had seen prey stretching out its neck for slaughter. Boom! A black sphere of light flashed from Osman's fingertip, instantly expanding 100-fold. It covered the sky and the earth as it shot towards the black armored guard with the flag in his right hand. Wonderful! At this moment time seemed to stop. All the Arab soldiers, including Daluan Ruozan, Huashu Wazang, Dusong Mangpoj, and even Abu Muslim, seemed to relax. Although the process had been full of twists and turns, they had ultimately succeeded in their goal. With Osman's cultivation, being able to get so close to him was almost certain death. It was over. As long as they seized that war banner, the Tang dynasty would no longer be able to resist the combined assault of the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks. As Daluan Ruozan stood beneath the banner of the Uzan White Yak, this thought flitted through his mind. He had already thrown the matter of Dawusili to the back of his mind. He only knew one thing. The war was about to reverse. The moment Osman succeeded would also be the moment the Tang dynasty would crumble. While the Arabs, Western Turks, and Uzan were reinvigorated, the Tang dynasty was in a completely different situation. Not good. The 9 Dragon Blood War banner is about to be broken. Hurry and save General Li. As the Tang soldiers stared at the insignificant black armored guard in the distance, they were like a drop in the ocean under Osman's heaven-shaking attack. All the Tang soldiers began to panic, their faces contorted in fear. Chapter 1126. Nay. In the distance, Wang Chong and the white-hoofed shadow had been fiercely battling with Ibak. But at this moment, they suddenly turned around and began to charge toward the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, and even the chief of Wushang were doing all they could to stop Osman. But it was too late. No matter what they did, it was too late. The atmosphere on the battlefield was extremely tense at this moment. Just when the black armored guard was about to die to Osman's palm, something completely unexpected occurred. Barbarian of the western regions, you overestimate your strength. In the blink of an eye, just when Osman thought that victory was within his grasp, a deep and emotionless voice suddenly rang out in his ear. The black armored guard had been standing motionlessly, but at this moment, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Osman. An indescribable feeling surged through his heart. Someone of Osman's cultivation level would never be able to raise their head while he was attacking from such a short distance. This is impossible. Osman inwardly roared. An intense sense of danger welled up in his heart. Bang! Right at this moment, a light flashed and a palm suddenly stretched out. This palm shattered Osman's torrent of energy and slammed into Osman's chest. The power was so great that Osman felt as if the entire world had lost its splendor in that instant. Everything in the world seemed insignificant in the face of this palm. Kacha! In that instant, time seemed to slow down countless times. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, Osman heard a crisp sound come from his chest. The Nile war armor that he had spent tremendous effort, resources, and countless promises to obtain from a member of the imperial household had instantly shattered. Not even the combined efforts of 3 great generals of the Sassanid dynasty could shatter it. But this black-armored guard of the Tang dynasty couldn't even last a single palm. Pooh! In an instant, Osman's entire body shook, and he immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. After which, he was ruthlessly sent flying by an unstoppable force that was as great as a mountain and an ocean before smashing into the ground. Boom! The ground was like paper, instantly shattering, collapsing, sinking, and exploding. Boulders the size of millstones were sent flying by the force of Osman's fall. Before it could fly far, it exploded again in the air, turning into hundreds and thousands of tiny gravel. Smoke and dust billowed throughout the entire battlefield. Under the gazes of countless people, Osman's armor was shattered. Fragments of his armor were scattered all over the battlefield, and Osman's body was drenched in blood. Pooh! Osman crawled up from the ground. Before he could say anything, his body trembled, and in the blink of an eye, he spat out another mouthful of blood. His originally resolute face instantly became as pale as a sheet of paper. Shocking. Everyone on the battlefield who saw this scene was shocked to the extreme. That unremarkable black armored guard at the center of the formation was actually able to heavily injure Osman with a single palm strike. This completely overturned everyone's understanding of the world. This was something that no one had ever expected. This is impossible. At this moment, no one was more shocked than Abu Muslim. His fingers were clenched so tightly that they felt like his bones were about to shatter. As Osman's comrade in arms, Abu Muslim was well aware of his strength. He didn't dare to believe that Osman could be heavily injured by a single palm. The distant Daluan Ruozan was also stunned. The moment Osman had been sent flying, Daluan Ruozan's heart had turned cold, as if he had been the one being sent flying, not Osman. Imperial Great General. They actually sent an Imperial Great General to be the banner bearer of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. Daluan Ruozan's lips were trembling, his mind in disarray. Qutayba had fought against that mysterious old man. Abu Muslim had drawn away Gao Xianji. Ziad had drawn away Qing Qianli. Huashu Wuzong had drawn away Wang Yan. In the end, Governor Osman had come alone, beheaded the banner bearer, and broken the 9 Dragon Blood War formation. In Daluan Ruozan's plan, everything had gone smoothly. However, he had never expected that the final variable would be the black armored guard holding the flag. This ordinary-looking flag bearer was actually stronger than Governor Osman of Cairo. Deathly stillness. For a moment, the entire battlefield was silent. Everyone was so shocked by this sight that they couldn't speak. Even Wang Chong was flabbergasted, let alone the others. Hand over your life. A voice shattered the silence. At this moment, the only person on the battlefield who was not affected was the black armored guard himself. Boom! The black armored guard stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the distant Osman. But before he could attack, there was an explosion of bloody light as Osman's energy swelled. The black armored guard narrowed his eyes and prepared to receive Osman's counterattack. But what happened next took him by complete surprise. Just who are you? Go. Osman's first words were directed at the black armored guard. However, as soon as he said run, he turned into a streak of bloody light and fled like a stray dog at an astonishing speed. Humph. Blood escape art. The black armored guard's eyes flashed with cold light, but he immediately stopped and did not pursue Osman. There were many secret arts in this world that could stimulate one's potential and raise one's strength for a short period of time, just like the blood escape art of the sections. Osman was definitely not using the blood escape art, but there was no question that it was also a method to stimulate one's potential. I'll let you go for now, but will you still be able to enter the field in the next battle? The black armored guard's eyes flashed as he looked away from Osman. His breathing was long and steady, as if he had not been affected in the slightest. He continued to hold the banner in the center of the 9 Dragon Blood battle formation. To the bearer of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, the most important thing was never to kill the enemy, but to wield the banner. As long as the banner existed, the man would exist. If the banner died, the man would die. This was the belief and rule that the black armored guard had upheld for generations. As Osman fled, the entire battlefield came to its senses. In a flash, all the Tang dynasty soldiers exploded with cheers. Kill! Kill these Arabs! Charge! Kill them all! No one had expected the black armored guard to wield the banner to be so powerful. The Tang dynasty had actually hidden another imperial great general, one even stronger than Osman. In a flash, the Tang dynasty's morale soared. The countless Tang dynasty soldiers, along with the more than 20,000 soldiers of the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Roaring Tiger Army, all charged toward the Arabs. Load. Ready. Release. Energized, Suhan's Han began to issue a string of orders. The 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae worked with the 9 dragon blood formation to rapidly advance toward the Arabs, the Western Turks, and the Yuzhan. More and more soldiers left the first defense line and entered the fierce battlefield. This time, the Tang dynasty no longer needed to rely on the defense line. All its soldiers had gathered together into a massive system and were launching an all-out assault on the Arabs for the first time. Plush, plush, plush. Arrows rained down, piercing through the bodies of Arab soldiers and causing blood to gush onto the ground. Panicked Arab corpses piled on top of each other. Thud, thud, thud as they toppled to the ground. Kill. On the entire battlefield, the most lethal force was still the 9 dragon blood formation. Clang, clang, clang. Countless halos vibrated under the effect of the 9 dragon blood war banner. The Tongluo Grand Halo, the Xuanwu Halo, the Dragon Stallion Halo, the Divine Prison Halo, the Divine Martial Halo, the Iron Wall Halo, the Azure Martial Halo. A total of 9 dazzling war halos appeared on the 20,000-some elite Tang cavalry. At this moment, this army had become the most powerful force in the entire continent in the current world. Not even the strongest Arab army, the Revelation Army, was a match for them, much less anyone else. Go. Let's go. At this moment, the Arabs had truly been routed. Osman's heavy injury had dealt an unimaginable blow to their morale. They had originally believed that they had the advantage in terms of great generals, but now, all this advantage had been lost. The Tang dynasty had just as many great generals as the 3 great empires. Although the Arabs, Yuzhan, and Western Turks still had the advantage in numbers, the entire army had lost all courage to fight. All the Arab soldiers began to flee at the sight of that ancient war banner that was tinged with black at the center of the red banner. Retreat! Retreat! Everyone retreat! Abu Muslim roared. His furious, unwilling, and helpless voice resounded over the battlefield. Abu Muslim stood in the air, the eye of the demon god on his hands. His battle with Gao Xianji was still far from over. Although Gao Xianji had gotten much stronger, he still had not reached the level where he could defeat him. But even though the battle between the great generals had not yet been decided, Abu Muslim was still forced to order a retreat. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a horn suddenly blared from the rear of the Arab army. But compared to the loud and passionate call of the attack, this horn was now tinged with panic. Rumble! In an instant, smoke and dust billowed, and the entire army retreated even faster. And this was not the only effect on the other sides of the battlefield. Ziad Ibak, Huashu Wazong, and Dusong Mangpoch began to retreat, no longer in the mood to continue fighting. In this battle, the greatest weakness of the Tang dynasty was the 9 dragon blood formation. As long as the banner at the center of the formation was destroyed, everything else would fall apart. However, the moment the black armored flag bearer made his move, all of these flaws immediately disappeared. Chapter 1127. Let's go. In the air, Ziad threw out the ocean ring. Black energy rumbled as it slammed into the body of Chung Qianli's supreme desolation god. Bang! It shattered the stellar energy chains that Chung Qianli had thrown at it, and then it began to flee. Ziad had participated in many different battles, but this could be said to be the strangest battle he had ever fought. It had started extremely quickly and ended extremely quickly. Whoosh! Behind Ziad, Huashu Wazong and Dusong Mangpoch also pushed back their opponents and fled like lightning bolts. At this moment Abu Muslim, who had pushed back Gao Xianji with a punch, also began to flee. Bum bum bum. Just as he was retreating into the distance, he suddenly heard an earth-shattering boom. Even though the shockwave was several tens of thousands of feet away, it still blew towards him. Not good. Abu Muslim's heart trembled as he turned around. It's Qutayba. Even someone of Abu Muslim's cultivation level was alarmed by the intensity of the battle between these two energies. The only people on the battlefield who could give Abu Muslim this feeling were the governor of war and that mysterious elder. Abu Muslim suddenly turned his head. On the other end of the battlefield, he could see that a sandstorm with a radius of several dozen feet had soared into the sky, stretching for several hundred feet. This sandstorm was made up of countless rocks, dirt, warhorses, and the wreckage of countless soldiers. Torrents of energy spun rapidly in the void, whistling sharply. The momentum was incomparably terrifying. Bang! A pile of corpses was struck by the edge of the sandstorm, and instantly torn to shreds. And then they were pulled into the surging storm to add to its momentum. In a flash, Abu Muslim's body went stiff, and he became motionless. Someone of Qutaybah's personality would never retreat. Abu Muslim suddenly recalled Qutaybah's order. Those who retreat will die. On the first day of battle, Abu Muslim had blown the horn and forced Qutaybah to retreat. But this could not be repeated. Given Qutaybah's pride, he would never be able to accept retreating in front of the Tang people. More importantly, though Abu Muslim was the highest commander of the East, his orders had no effect on the soldiers under Qutaybah's command. Not a single one of Qutaybah's top-class armies, whether it was the Revelation Army, Death Army, or Blood Beast Army, had retreated, and many of them were still hesitating. To the current Arab army, this was absolutely fatal. This is troublesome. I can't retreat. If we don't convince Qutaybah and retreat now, we'll be doomed. Almost at the same time, in the distance, Dalwan Ruozin's eyelids twitched violently, and his face suddenly became gloomy. If Qutaybah did not retreat, and the others retreated, the three empires would suffer an unprecedented defeat. And if they ignored Qutaybah and retreated, leading to some unpredictable result, the Tang dynasty would truly emerge victorious in this battle, and Arabia would have no chance of surviving. Boom! Just when Abu Muslim was prepared to issue the order to reinforce Qutaybah, there was a massive boom. Under the gazes of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the battlefield, the huge sandstorm, that was dozens of meters tall, suddenly exploded violently. Two unimaginably huge forces collided violently inside. With a kacha sound, the huge sandstorm was torn into two. Bang! Bang! Two figures, one gold and one black, appeared in the center of the sandstorm. That golden figure that seemed like a god to them was thrown more than 100 feet by this enormous energy. Clack! The golden helmet that had accompanied Qutaybah for more than 10 years flew out of his head, shattering into countless cracks in the air. When it fell to the ground, the helmet had completely caved in. Without the protection of the helmet, Qutaybah's hair was in complete disarray. Everyone was in an uproar at this sight. The Arab cavalry stared with wide eyes in disbelief. In their minds, Qutaybah had always been strong, confident, and possessed the power to crush all. No one could make him retreat, which was why many of them had not retreated. All of Arabia, including Abu Muslim's subordinates, had Qutaybah's fans. He was the true war god of Arabia, but in all their years of battle, they had never seen Qutaybah in such a sorry state. Impossible! This is impossible! There's no one in this world that can defeat my lord. No one was more shocked than the army that Qutaybah had brought from the north. The sight of Qutaybah's helmet in disarray, and his hair in disarray, was like a tsunami in everyone's mind. At this moment, Abu Muslim, Ibak, Ziyad, Huashu Huaitsong, and the others were just as shocked as the other soldiers. How could this be? Abu Muslim muttered to himself. The closer one was to Qutaybah, the more they understood just how powerful he was, and the more stunned they were by this sight. Abu Muslim almost subconsciously turned his head to look across from Qutaybah. That mysterious black-clothed elder was floating in the air, his hair in disarray and his face pale. It seemed like his injuries were no less severe than Qutaybah's. Who dares to retreat? In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, an extremely cold voice sounded in his ears. Qutaybah stared at the evil emperor, his eyes vicious and his hair in disarray, the killing intent in his heart only rising. Bzzz. The space in a radius of 100 feet began to twist, making everything blurry and indistinct. Old thing, you've angered me. Qutaybah fiercely glared at the evil emperor. In his life, no one had ever been able to force him to such a state. Even Abu Muslim had to lower his head in front of him and endure. For the first time, Qutaybah was determined to kill this Eastern elder he had never seen before, and even spoke a different language. Barbarians of the Western regions, do you really think that no one can subdue you? The evil emperor's expression was cold and aloof, and though his face was pale, he showed no signs of yielding. In that battle just now, both he and Kateba had been evenly matched, with neither gaining the upper hand. Master! At this moment, a concerned shout came from the distance. Wang Chong, riding on the white-hoofed shadow, looked at the distant evil emperor with concern in his eyes. Although Kateba was in a sorry state, his master, the evil emperor, was not in a good condition. In Wang Chong's mind, the evil emperor held an unparalleled status. Deep within, Wang Chong did not wish for any harm to befall him. Lord Gao, General Chung, Father, Village Chief, General Li. Everyone attack together and kill Kateba. Wang Chong's voice resounded through the sky. With these words, Wang Chong and his 7,000 Wuxiang cavalry charged at Kateba, abandoning the three main forces behind them. At almost the same time, Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Wang Yan, chief of Wuxiang, and even the black-armored guard maintaining the 9-dragon blood war banner charged at Kateba. As long as they killed Kateba, this battle would be won. Wang Chong leaned against his horse, his eyes blazing with a light even brighter than the sun. The central figure in this battle was Kateba. Once Kateba was killed, the Arab army would no longer have the strength to reverse the situation. The sound of hooves galloping could be heard. The situation of the entire battlefield rapidly changed. It instantly became incomparably tense, more dangerous than ever before. Bang! A black boot that was twice the size of an ordinary man's boot stomped forward. The primary duty of the banner holder was to protect the banner, but as long as this did not violate their own objectives, they could also participate in the fierce battle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 enormous consciousnesses of the great general level flew through the air and locked onto Kateba. At this moment, even Kateba couldn't help but grimace. If they were just ordinary great generals, Kateba would have been able to deal with them alone. Other than Cheng Qianli and the others, Kateba could ignore them, but including the demonic emperor old man, Kateba sensed 3 existences that posed a powerful threat to him. Let's go! Abu Muslim roared, his face fraught with worry. In the current situation, Osman was heavily injured and could no longer participate in the battle. Once the battle began, Abu Muslim was not confident that he could defeat the Tang people without a great general. Kateba remained motionless as he watched the powerful auras rapidly approach him, all of which were as vast as mountains and seas. As the proud Arab war god, it was no easy task for him to make Kateba retreat. Hurry and go! Abu Muslim was burning with anxiety. If he missed this opportunity, he really wouldn't be able to leave. Brother Wenfu, I've come to help you. At this moment an elderly voice spoke. The chief of Wuxiang was the closest, so he was the first to arrive. Rumble! In a flash of light and a fierce gale, countless strands of origin energy began to gather in a radius of 100 li around the chief of Wuxiang. And in the center of this origin energy, a massive azure hand the size of a mountain shot through the air toward Kateba. Buzz! Kateba grimaced at this sight. The chief of Wuxiang had used a technique that was 70 to 80% similar to the evil emperor's. Just like him, the two of them had vaguely touched upon that level of existence. Kateba would never retreat against the evil emperor. But with the addition of the chief of Wuxiang, everything was different. Bang! A vast and majestic beam of golden sword chi flew through the air toward the massive azure hand that the chief of Wuxiang had unleashed. At almost the same time, the surrounding origin energy converged into a massive mountain fist that rumbled toward Kateba. Chapter 11:28. Rumble. The earth quaked and the mountains shattered. The golden sword chi smashed into the azure hand, but Kateba's sword chi was also shattered by a punch from the evil emperor. Let's go! In the face of the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxiang, the black-armored guards in the rear, and the other great generals of the Tang dynasty, even someone as proud as Kateba, who would never easily retreat, was forced to retreat at a time like this. Whoosh! In a flash of golden light, another bolt of sword chi pierced through the clouds. In the blink of an eye, the mountain of gold and mountain of jade slashed down at the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxiang, and the vast Tang dynasty army. Kateba transformed into a golden streak of light and began to retreat. Withdraw! The moment Qutayba left, all the Arab soldiers, including the Western Turks and the Uzan, began to retreat to the west. After them, with this order, everyone was invigorated, and like a surging tide, they followed the Arab soldiers into the rear. All ballistae advance at full speed. Release! In the rear, Su Hanshan's eyes were calm as he seized this chance to order the ballistae to advance. Boom! 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 Ballista bolts howled through the air, instantly striking the Arab horsemen at the very back. In the blink of an eye, more and more Arab horsemen were felled like wooden pillars. In a few short moments, tens of thousands of Arab, Uzan and Western Turkic soldiers had been slaughtered in this rout. Now that they had left the steel defense line, the Great Tang had once again seized the upper hand in this pursuit. Run! Run! The Tang people are coming! The Arab, Uzan, and Western Turkic cavalry panicked and fled into the distance. Squelch! An Arab horseman failed to dodge in time, and was instantly overtaken by a Tang dynasty horseman. A sword pierced through the neck, causing the horseman to fall from his horse. Following that, streaks of sharp blade light flashed through the void, and more people fell from their horses. The chaotic formation caused the cavalry in the rear to be blocked by the cavalry in the front, and some of the cavalry even collided with the cavalry, causing both riders and their horses to topple to the ground. The Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, and Dragon Stallion Army caught up to them and pierced them to death. All Uzan cavalrymen, take the left flank. Dewissely, dispatch all the Green Wolves to intercept the Tang dynasty's troops. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, Dalawan Ruozan's heart surged. In a short period of time, he issued a series of orders. Although Dewissely had not brought many soldiers with him for this battle, he had brought far more Green Wolves than he had imagined. Even though the Tang dynasty had shot many of them down, there were still 20 to 30,000 of them left. Although these wolves posed no real threat to the tens of thousands of top-class Tang dynasty soldiers, they were the best tool to intercept the Tang dynasty's pursuit. Swish swish swish, heavy swords swung through the air, and a green wolf larger than an adult man was cleaved in two by a top-class Tang dynasty soldier. Starting from the center of its forehead, the two halves of the corpse fell to the ground, dripping with blood and guts. But this did not stop the wolves from madly charging forward to stop the Tang dynasty army. In his alliance with Dalawan Ruozan, Dewissely had always held back, and all of his orders had been greatly discounted. But this time, Dewissely had sent out all his wolves to stop the Tang army. The result of this battle had completely surpassed his expectations, and even Dewissely was scared out of his wits. If he could not stop the Tang dynasty, even the Western Turks might die in this battle. Release! With a wave of Su Hanshan's arm, sharp crossbow bolts shot out like lightning bolts, quickly nailing a dozen or so giant wolves in a straight line to the ground. Although ballista bolts were extremely precious, and had only ever been used to deal with enemy soldiers, Su Hanshan had no other choice at this crucial moment. Awa! Howls filled the air as packs of wolves began to fall and be swiftly cleaned up. All of them gathered their courage and began to pursue the morale of the three armies. But even so, Dewissely's wolves had won an extremely important moment of respite for the army. The tens of thousands of Tang dynasty soldiers quickly overtook the obstacles and began to pursue. This time, they did not stop halfway through the pursuit. All the Tang dynasty soldiers worked together to pursue the Arabs, the Uzan, and the Western Turks from the first defense line to the western edge of Talas, where they doggedly pursued the Arabs, Turks, and Uzan. After pursuing for 10 some li, the road was strewn with corpses, and blood had left a long trail in the wake of the three armies' escape. All Wuxian cavalry, hear my order. Charge! Wang Chang's voice was particularly loud in the roiling dust. Behind him, the 6,000 some Wuxian cavalry maintained the Azura Hell formation even as they pursued. This dreadful power was like the deepest nightmare, causing all three armies to panic like stray dogs. Of all the soldiers of the Tang dynasty, the Wuxian cavalry were the fastest. Even the Mamelukes would find it difficult to compare to the four halos of Dusk Stallion. This was also the force of the Tang dynasty that posed the greatest threat to the Uzan, Western Turks, and Arabs. In the pursuit, A considerable number of soldiers had died to the Wuxian cavalry. Buzz! Just when Wang Chong was preparing to lead his army in pursuit, a black figure in front of him swayed and almost fell off his horse. Wang Chong didn't care at first, but a moment later, he glanced over and paled in fright. Master! Wang Chong's entire body trembled as he hurriedly lunged toward that familiar figure. In a flash, he had jumped off the white-hoofed shadow and landed in front of the evil emperor. At this moment, the evil emperor's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Although his expression was normal, Wang Chong could clearly see a trickle of blood seeping out of the corner of the evil emperor's mouth. Although the evil emperor was doing his utmost to hide his right hand, if one looked carefully, one would also see a trickle of blood trickling down his 5 fingers. How could this be? Wang Chong's heart chilled and his expression nervous. He immediately grabbed the evil emperor's wrist and began to pour his energy into the evil emperor's body. Chonga, it's fine. The evil emperor waved his hand and closed his eyes, slowly calming the stellar energy in his body. It's just a small wound. I can still endure it. The urgent task at hand is to prevent the Arabs and Qutayba from noticing anything. As the evil emperor spoke, his aura grew more and more disorderly. The upheaval in his sect, and the plot of his 2 traitorous disciples, had affected him far more than he had imagined. Although the myriad spirit sea art treated every acupuncture point in the body as a dantian, this did not mean that the dantian was unimportant, and it certainly did not mean that the dantian could be destroyed. In truth, not even the creator of the technique could have imagined that the evil emperor would be able to cultivate the myriad spirit sea art to this level even after his dantian had been destroyed. But even so, the destruction of the evil emperor's dantian was still a major problem for him. Master, don't speak for now. I'll help you treat your injuries. As the commander-in-chief of the army, Wang Chong had always been calm and farsighted. But this time, when he saw the demonic emperor old man injured, for the first time, anxiety and unease appeared on his face. Wang Chong, let me do it. I have the best understanding of your master's condition, and besides, you're not strong enough. An elderly voice resounded in his ear as Chief of Wuxiang rode up from the rear. In truth, he had discovered the evil emperor's condition earlier than anyone else. Although they had succeeded in intimidating Qutayba in this battle, the evil emperor had also suffered far more severe injuries than they seemed. After all, Qutayba had the advantage in age and physical strength, and he had not been like the evil emperor, whose dantian had been destroyed. In his battle with Qutayba, the chief of Wuxiang had already discovered that this Arab war god was extremely difficult to deal with, and he had also discovered that the evil emperor was injured. But for the greater good, the chief of Wuxiang had not said a word. Wang Chong, don't let Qutayba suspect anything. Lead the soldiers in pursuit. Don't let him see any openings. Wang Chong said nothing, only stared at the pale face of his master, the evil emperor. Other than his first encounter with the evil emperor, Wang Chong had never seen the evil emperor injured. He was far too strong, even easily suppressing Lu Wu. In Wang Chong's understanding, his master would never be defeated. Chong, go. The greater good is above all else, the evil emperor said with his eyes closed. Village chief, I'll have to trouble you with my master. Wang Chong clenched his teeth, finally mounted his horse, and led his army into the distance. This pursuit lasted until nightfall before truly coming to a halt. The Tang dynasty did not have many cavalry, and if they continued to pursue, they might cause the army to fall apart and allow the Arabs to reverse the situation. Only when the Arabs were no longer in sight did Wang Chong sound the gongs to call off the army and lead his army back to the city of Talis. Bang! The sight of the army's triumphant return caused the towering walls of Talis to explode with heaven-shaking cheers. Wonderful! The army won! Our Tang dynasty has won! Zhang Shouji and the many craftsmen who had followed the army to Talis and worked on the steel walls cheered as they excitedly walked out of the city. Behind them, many herdsmen from various tribes who were herding cattle and sheep also plucked up their courage and walked out of the city. They had been somewhat confused at the start, but when they saw the victorious army and the mercenaries, All of them began to cheer. Their voices of excitement soared into the heavens. The Tang dynasty had won. They had actually defeated the 500,000 soldiers of the Uzun, the Western Turks, and the Arabs. None of them had expected this at the start. They had truly escaped calamity in this battle. Chapter 1129. Whoosh! The evil emperor was seated cross-legged on the bed, wisps of thick mist rising from the top of his head. After some time, the demonic emperor old man finally opened his eyes and gave a long sigh. His pale face gradually regained its ruddy color. Gao Xianji, Wang Chong, Cheng Qianli, and Wang Yin were all watching the evil emperor, and they all breathed sighs of relief at this sight. The evil emperor had the highest cultivation in the entire army, and only he had the strength to stand against Qutayba in a one-on-one battle. If something had happened to the evil emperor, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Master, how is it? Wang Chong immediately stepped forward, a worried look on his face as the evil emperor withdrew his cultivation. I'm fine. The demonic emperor old man shook his head as he got off the bed. Wang Chong carefully examined his master, and sensed that his master's aura was still a little disorderly, not as calm as it had been at the start. A hint of concern flashed through his eyes. It was clear that his master's condition was not as good as he had said. Lord Gao, General Cheng, thank you. Master is fine. Everyone go and rest. In addition, I have some matters to discuss with Master. Wang Chong turned his head to the others in the hall. That's fine. If not for General Li, they would have almost been able to reverse the situation. Moreover, everyone has used up a lot of their strength and stellar energy. Go and rest. Gao Xianji came back to his senses and nodded. He called out to the people behind him, and they immediately walked out in a single file. Soon, only Wang Chong, the evil emperor, and the chief of Wuxiang were left in the room. Although the evil emperor and the chief of Wuxiang hadn't known each other for very long, they had comprehended the great Tao together, and could be considered good friends. Master, is it that serious this time? Wang Chong said worriedly. There were no outsiders in the room, so Wang Chong naturally didn't need to avoid it. After a long silence, the evil emperor finally nodded. Actually, it's not just this time that it's serious. It's always been like this. Without the Dantian, the largest chi acupoint, it would be very difficult for me to sustain this intense battle that is close to the minute subtlety realm for too long. Is there no way to repair the Dantian? Wang Chong said with a heavy heart. The evil emperor glanced at the chief of Wuxiang, and both of them shook their heads. Actually, when I accompanied your master to the Uzun highlands to repel those Uzun people, your master and I went to look through a large number of books. Although Wuxiang village was isolated from the rest of the world, there was a place that preserved a large number of ancient books, all of which were unique copies that could not be found outside. Brother Wenfu and I looked through all of the books, and even flipped through some other sources, but we couldn't find any related books. The Dantian is the source of energy in the human body. No one has ever heard of anyone being able to cultivate after the Dantian is destroyed. Brother Wenfu's ability to return to the peak after the destruction is already quite astonishing. This old man has lived for many years, but if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed that such a thing could happen. Before the evil emperor could say anything, the chief of Wuxiang suddenly spoke up. Wang Chong raised his head and saw that his master, the evil emperor, was silent, a tacit agreement. How could this be? Wang Chong muttered to himself. Wang Chong was well aware of the cultivation and attainments of his master, the evil emperor. In the entire world, including the sects, his master was undoubtedly one of the top existences. If even he was helpless, then it would be very difficult to find a way to repair the Dantian. Chonga, there's no need to worry. Your master has lived for many years, and no longer has any regrets. Your master is still worried about that Qutayba. This time, although your master worked with the village chief to injure him and scare him away, he's still much younger than us. Once he recovers from his injuries, he'll definitely come back. The village chief and I can stop him for now, but in the long run, neither I nor the village chief will be able to stop him, the evil emperor said. The demonic emperor man said, Wang Chong said nothing, but a dark and gloomy expression appeared on his face. On the entire battlefield, the chief of Wuxiang and the evil emperor were the strongest. If not even they could deal with Kateba, no one could. Moreover, his master's Dantian had been destroyed, and the chief of Wuxiang was already more than 90 years old. There was no way for him to compare to Kateba, and this was a fact that Wang Chong could not change. Master rests well. As for Kateba, no matter what, I will find a way to defeat him. The evil emperor and the chief of Wuxiang glanced at each other and chuckled. Ha ha ha, I've already discussed this matter with your master. We can only rely on you. The chief of Wuxiang stroked his beard and laughed. That's right. Chong'er, this is also your master's opinion. Your talent and comprehension abilities are unparalleled in your master's life. The fact that you were able to reach the Saint Martial realm so quickly is proof of this. The evil emperor was also smiling. Wang Chong stared blankly at the smiling faces of his master and the chief of Wuxiang, not understanding what they meant. But master, although I can use the great Yama formation, I'm not even a great general, while Kateba is an expert close to the subtle realm. With my current cultivation, how could I be a match for Kateba? Wang Chong said. The words of his master and the chief of Wuxiang had been far too sudden, completely taking him by surprise. Wang Chong had never exchanged blows with Kateba, but he understood that the gap between them was far too great. The current you naturally can't. The evil emperor smiled, his eyes deep and wise. Thus, you must listen very carefully to every word your master says. Village chief, let us master and disciple be alone for a while. In addition, we will have to delay you for a while. I'll have to trouble you to stand guard for us. Haha, brother Wenfu, there's no need to be polite. The old village chief responded and quickly strode out. Wang Chong froze, glanced at the demonic emperor old man, and then suddenly understood. He fell silent and said no more. The evil emperor turned back to Wang Chong, knowing that he had understood. He smiled and nodded. Wang Chong had an extremely high level of comprehension, and he was also able to comprehend things by analogy. This was also something he was very satisfied with. Chong'er, you and Xiaoyao are the last two disciples I accepted, and also the only two disciples I have. Little Yao has a naughty and mischievous personality, and not even your master can do anything about it. Thus, the only one who can truly inherit your master's legacy is you. Your master has already passed on the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art to you. Your master will now pass on the final technique, the myriad spirit sea art, to you. This is another important reason your master came all the way to Talas, the evil emperor said. A hint of gratitude flashed through Wang Chong's eyes as he gazed at his master. His master had truly given him everything he knew, wanting nothing more than to teach Wang Chong everything he knew. In Wang Chong's life, his master, the evil emperor, had undoubtedly treated him the best. In Wang Chong's heart, he had long ago come to view his master as a family member. These thoughts flitted through Wang Chong's mind, and Wang Chong quickly calmed down. But master, didn't you say that the myriad spirit sea art, and the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, and even all other techniques conflict with each other? Wang Chong composed himself and sternly said, the myriad spirit sea art requires destruction before construction, and cultivating it again requires an extremely long time. The Battle of Talas has yet to completely settle, so your disciple cannot disperse this art and cultivate it again. The myriad spirit sea art used the acupoints of the body as the dantian, and it conflicted with all the known techniques of the central planes. This made it impossible for other martial artists to cultivate the myriad spirit sea art. The myriad spirit sea art used the acupoints of the body as the dantian, which conflicted with all the known techniques of the central planes. This made it impossible for other martial artists to cultivate the myriad spirit sea art. Haha, times have changed. In the past, this would naturally be impossible, but your master is not teaching you just the myriad spirit sea art, but the more fundamental Tao of energy. The evil emperor smiled. Tao of energy? Wang Chong raised his brow and raised his head, a look of surprise on his face for the first time. These words were completely different from what he had expected. All martial arts are just a formality. As long as one understands the rules and principles involved, One can bypass all restrictions and cultivate. The myriad spirit sea art is the same. The evil emperor lightly stroked his beard and faintly smiled, as he spoke of a completely different set of martial arts principles. Wang Chong was at first stunned, and then he began to think. Chong'er, your master will now teach you the entire technique of the myriad spirit sea art. Listen carefully. Qi and Qi are one, and all phenomena are born. Time was of the essence, so the evil emperor slowly began to recite the myriad spirit sea art's mantra. Wang Chong did not dare to be negligent in his master's teachings, and he immediately focused on listening. The myriad spirit sea art had more than 10,000 words, and its contents were extremely profound. Chong'er, remember it. An elderly voice resounded in his ear, and a moment later, the evil emperor suddenly slapped a palm against Wang Chong's shoulder. Now I will tell you what the true Tao of energy is. Bang! A second later, the air rumbled, and before Wang Chong could react, Wang Chong's soul was pulled by a powerful force, and he was dragged along with the evil emperor into a new and profound world. Chong'er, open your eyes and look carefully. This is the true face of energy. As long as you understand the essence of energy, you can touch upon the subtle realm. The people of the world knew that great generals were the peak of the martial path, but few knew that there was an even more subtle realm above them, the subtle realm. People as powerful as Gao Xianji and Dewussili, even though they were revered by the people of the world, did not even know of the subtle realm. If not for existences like the chief of Wuxiang and the evil emperor, who had spent their entire lives on the path of martial arts, they would never have been able to comprehend this realm. Teaching Wang Chong the myriad spirit sea art was only a means. The true goal of the evil emperor was to teach the unfathomable subtle realm he had comprehended to Wang Chong. Chapter 1130. The wind howled, and endless rays of light surged from all directions. This was the first time Wang Chong had ever come into contact with such a profound realm. He could see countless lights of different colors filling every corner of the void. Is this the energy of the world? Wang Chong muttered to himself as he looked around. Correct. A familiar voice came from the air. It was the voice of his master, the evil emperor. There are thousands of different kinds of energy in the world. The stellar energy that we cultivate is only one of them, or perhaps just a few of them. Different techniques have different kinds of energy, so their properties are naturally different. We absorb the energy of the world into our bodies and use it for ourselves. This is the process of cultivating the martial path. Many thanks for Master's guidance. Your disciple understands. Wang Chong nodded in realization. With a soul that had lived 2 lives, Wang Chong understood these principles even more than the evil emperor. The evil emperor only needed to give him a few pointers, but he already understood everything. Haha, Chong'er, you truly have an extremely high comprehension ability. Back then, your master and the village chief needed a very long time to understand this principle. We originally believed that you would need a very long time to understand, but you immediately understood. The evil emperor had a gratified look on his face. The student had surpassed the master. To the demonic emperor old man, there was nothing to regret about taking in a disciple who was even more outstanding and promising than himself. Chong'er, carefully sense it. Do you feel it? Different colors represent different properties. Even if they are the same color, there are different levels of energy. Some are like a trickle, and some are like a mighty river. What we martial artists need to do is to absorb those surging rivers of energy and constantly strengthen ourselves. Thus, if you can do this, even if your cultivation level hasn't risen, your strength will undergo a qualitative transformation, allowing you to display a fighting strength far above your current level. At this level, even if you haven't reached the great general level, does it matter? Buzz. The moment the evil emperor spoke, the world before Wang Chong once more changed. The entire world suddenly became richer and richer, and the colors became brighter and brighter. The entire space was filled with all kinds of energy. In Wang Chong's perception, the entire world suddenly became much clearer, as if he was looking at it with a magnifying glass. Wang Chong understood. He knew that his master was using his powerful cultivation base and realm to directly display the world in his eyes to him. Their spiritual powers were now connected. Naturally, Wang Chong could see the world that the evil emperor saw. Wang Chong had experienced this before, so he cherished this opportunity even more. He suddenly opened his mind, and his whole body entered this world of energy. In the world of consciousness and energy, there was no body, and there were no living things. As Wang Chong spread out his mental power, Wang Chong comprehended more and more. These energy balls were densely packed and covered the entire world. If one carefully sensed them, they would realize that some of these brightly colored energy balls were as fierce as flames, some were as warm as water, some were as cold as ice, and some were as warm as the sun. 1, 2, 3, 4. As Wang Chong explored, he sensed more and more different types of energy. 100, 1,000, 10,000. The more he tried, the more he realized that the energy of this world was not as simple as origin energy or stellar energy. This was just a general term. The energy that a martial artist cultivated was far more complicated than this. When Wang Chong saw a red energy ball, he suddenly had an irrepressible thought. A moment later, Wang Chong sent a wisp of his mind into the ball. Bzzz. It was like he had stepped from one world into another. A moment later, Wang Chong saw a completely different scene. Within this red ball of light were countless tiny particles of energy, densely packed together and filling every corner. Chonga, you can see it now. This is the secret of energy, the old village chief, and I call those tiny particles, before you are mustard seeds. All energy is made up of thousands of these even smaller mustard seeds. This is the secret of this world. The evil emperor said. His mind was connected to Wang Chong's, so he knew every move Wang Chong made. In this world, there were some people with extremely high comprehension abilities, able to draw inferences about other things from one instance, and comprehend by analogy. One didn't need to explain too much about the most profound principles. One only needed to describe them a little for them to completely understand. There was no doubt that Wang Chong was this sort of martial arts genius. What a pity. If only I had met this child earlier. The evil emperor couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Given the comprehension ability that Wang Chong had displayed, if he had met him earlier and carefully taught him, his accomplishments might have far surpassed his own. He might even have stepped into the subtle realm. At this moment, Wang Chong was completely unaware of his master's thoughts. Hearing the evil emperor's words, Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. The reason why Wang Chong knew all this was because he had come from an even earlier modern world. Thus, he knew everything that the evil emperor had said like the back of his hand. But the fact that his master, the evil emperor, was able to use his martial arts to touch upon the essence of this world was truly astonishing. All was quiet. Wang Chong was like a thirsty sponge, constantly exploring this unknown world. Although Wang Chong had long understood the principles of energy and mustard seed that the evil emperor had mentioned, knowing was one thing, actually seeing, feeling, and touching them was another. Wang Chong had never imagined that all these things would be presented to him in such a direct manner. This was of great help to Wang Chong. With every passing moment, every second, Wang Chong's understanding of the essence of martial arts continued to increase. Although this understanding could not increase Wang Chong's realm, it was just as the evil emperor had said. Once he understood the essence of qi, Wang Chong could still comb through his life's knowledge and obtain greater combat power. He didn't even need to reach that realm to unleash a higher level of combat power. As Wang Chong's understanding of the essence of qi continued to grow, time slowly passed. Suddenly, Wang Chong heard the voice of his master, the evil emperor. Chong'er, you truly did not disappoint your master. You were able to comprehend these principles so quickly. Your master will now teach you the final and most important thing, the subtle. Buzz. Wang Chong's heart trembled at these words, and he immediately focused his mind. He knew that every word his master was about to say would be extremely important. The subtle realm. Even though Wang Chong had reached the war saint level, he had not been able to touch upon the subtle realm. The entire world, including Wang Chong, only knew that the peak of the saint martial realm was the great general realm, and above the great general realm was the divine martial realm. As for how to reach the divine martial realm, Wang Chong had no idea. and no matter how hard he tried, he could not find the door. There were many people in the world like Wang Chong who had been stuck at the great general realm, unable to advance even an inch. Gao Xinji de Wuxia and Sishan Geshuhan, there was still a long list to go. In all of history, the only person who had truly touched upon the divine martial realm, and almost succeeded, was the Holy Emperor, who had been hailed as the greatest emperor of all time. Wang Chong had always believed that this was due to talent. In order to reach higher realms, one needed to possess the dazzling and peerless talent of the Holy Emperor, but it now appeared that this was far from the case. Even though the divine martial realm was like the sun and moon hanging high in the sky, unreachable and unattainable, there was still a flight of stairs that led there, and the intricate realm was undoubtedly the first step that led to the final shore. At this thought, Wang Chong couldn't help but feel a little excited and expectant. Wang Chong had originally believed that the evil emperor would speak some extremely profound principles, but reality was much simpler than Wang Chong had imagined. Chong-er, raise your head and look up. The evil emperor's voice came from his side. Wang Chong subconsciously raised his head, and a moment later, Wang Chong's entire body trembled. The moment he raised his head, he saw a sight that he would never be able to forget for the rest of his life. Through the layers of energy, at the very top of the dimension, Wang Chong saw balls of golden energy that were like blazing suns. Compared to other types of energy, these balls of energy were far more powerful. Wang Chong could sense that these balls of light were brimming with a vast, blazing, and berserk energy, just like the lava of a volcano. This energy was so dense that when Wang Chong raised his head, he couldn't help but feel like he was being burned by a blazing sun. All the energy in this dimension, in front of these golden, scarlet gold and violet gold balls of energy, was like fireflies before the bright moon, insignificant. This is... Wang Chong's heart trembled, thousands of thoughts flitting through his mind. He seemed to understand something, but he couldn't quite grasp it. Do you see? Behind those balls of energy is the world of the subtle. In truth, there are countless dimensions in this world, but because we martial artists are too weak, our senses too weak, our minds too weak, we are unable to sense them. Right now, we martial artists, even great generals, can only absorb the most ordinary energy, but once we reach the subtle realm, everything will be completely different. We can absorb even higher levels of energy from the depths of space, which is what you see now. Chapter 1131. Master, your disciple understands. Wang Chong nodded, a serious expression on his face. Chong-er, your master is confident that one day, you will be able to break through the peak of the Saint Martial realm and reach the subtle realm, accomplishing what your master was unable to do in the past. The evil emperor's voice slowly grew softer and softer. The evil emperor had taught Wang Chong everything he could. The rest was up to Wang Chong himself. Time slowly passed, and Wang Chong remained in the evil emperor's room for 4 whole hours. Only late at night did he emerge. Village chief, thank you. Upon stepping out of the room and seeing Chief of Wuxiang, Wang Chong gave a heartfelt bow. Haha, this is your good fortune, and it's also because you have an extremely high level of comprehension. What does it have to do with me? Chief of Wuxiang faintly smiled. Wang Chong was still at the peak brigadier general level, but the Chief of Wuxiang could clearly sense that Wang Chong's aura was growing stronger and more vigorous, like the plants in the summer. This exuberant vitality was like a blazing flame. This was not something that could be described with just the word cultivation. Wang Chong was only 17 years old, but he had already reached this level of comprehension. It was truly inconceivable. Wang Chong quickly left. Marquis. Not long after Wang Chong left, a figure emerged from the darkness and blocked Wang Chong's path. We just received a letter from our scouts. The Eagle team has discovered an Arab force 20 li from Talas. Just as Milord predicted, these Arabs, Uzin and Western Turks have not left. Lord Gao, General Chung, and the other generals are all in the hall. All that is left is Marquis. Lord Gao has ordered this lowly one to bring Marquis over immediately. The messenger bowed and said hurriedly, "Got it." Wang Chong raised his eyebrows and hurried over without saying anything. As the curtain of night fell, After traveling 20-some li from Talas to the west, Wang Chang's gaze stopped on an unremarkable place. If he looked carefully, he could see sparks of fire on the ground. At this moment, countless Uzan, Western Turks and Arabs had gathered there. In today's battle, the allied forces of the three sides had lost at least 100,000 men. The remaining 100,000 men had been routed and fled here. Even though the battle was over, the Arabs in the camp were far from done. I disagree. I don't agree to retreat at this time. Ibak fiercely slammed his palm against the metal table in front of him, his face red and his expression agitated. This battle is far from over. We still have 100,000 soldiers, we can still fight. My Mamelukes, the Mutri Great Cavalry of the Uzan, and the Celestial Wolf Cavalry of the Turks. We still have strength soldiers, and can still fight. Why should we retreat? And did any of you ever think that Caliph's order was to destroy Talas, flatten the east, and unify the entire eastern world? If we retreat now, are you prepared to face the wrath of the Caliph? What will all the governors of Arabia think of us? What will those ministers think of us? What will the Caliph think of us? Have any of you ever thought of that? That will be the apocalypse. Ibak's face was brimming with emotion. Boom! The table in front of him, forged from deep-sea Xian metal, immediately caved in, leaving a deep palm print on its surface. Everyone in the tent silently watched this sight. They could understand Ibak's anger, but none of this could change anything. Ibak, you've seen what happened today. This Tang army is far stronger than we imagined. Your Mamelukes haven't suffered too many losses and still have some strength, but my Beheaded army and Tiber's army have almost been wiped out. Even Abu Muslim's Ironblood army and Fearless army have suffered grievous losses. Even I was heavily injured, so there's no need to talk about the others. If you continue to persist, have you ever thought about what the consequences will be? Will you only be satisfied when all your soldiers are lost? Osman's face was pale, and he was still wearing the armor that had been shattered by the black armored guard of the Tang dynasty. The gap in the armor revealed his wounded chest, which was bandaged and smeared with ointment, but blood was still seeping out. The black armored guard's palm had not only injured him, but had also left a considerable amount of hidden energy in his body. Ibak, I know that you want to defeat the Tang people. Believe me, whether it's me or Osman, our desire is no less than yours. However, this matter still needed to be considered at length. Whether it's in terms of soldiers or the number of top-class great generals, we no longer have the slightest advantage. If this continues, we will find it very difficult to make a breakthrough. Abu Muslim also spoke at this moment, inwardly sighing. If he could defeat his foe, he would never have been willing to retreat. In addition, this is only a retreat, not an abandonment. Once we gather more soldiers and gather more people, we can still make a comeback. When that time comes, it won't be too late to fight to the death with the Tang people. Disgrace. Ibak's eyes were red. As long as we retreat, it will be an eternal disgrace that nothing can change. Abu Muslim, think about what happened when you were defeated last time. Do you want to do it again? Ibak, I know what you're saying, but have you ever thought about what will happen if you attack again in this situation and fail to win? Abu Muslim said. Ibak was stunned, but giving up was easier said than done. No matter what, I will never retreat. Qutayba, what about you? Don't tell me you're going to be like them and flee without a fight? Ibak's words immediately silenced the tent. Even Ziyad was startled and turned to look at Ibak. Although Abu Muslim and Osman had both lost many soldiers in this battle, the one who had suffered the greatest loss was actually Qutayba. After all, he had lost far more soldiers than anyone else in the tent. The Blood Beast Army, Death Army, and Revelation Army were the elite armies under Qutayba's command that were renowned throughout the Arabian Empire. They were also Qutayba's core fighting force. This war had dealt a massive blow to his army. Without these core armies, Qutayba's army would rapidly drop out of the top 10 ranks. This was also why everyone had done their best to avoid mentioning Qutayba in the previous debates. Moreover, Qutayba's prestige in Arabia was so great that no one dared to offend him. No one had expected Ibak to drag Qutayba into the fray in his rage. Once Qutayba was angered, the consequences would be unthinkable. and no one knew what he would do in his rage. Buzz! In a flash, the mood in the tent was so tense that even Abu Muslim found it rather unnatural. But Ibak was in a fit of rage and could no longer care. Ibak, there truly is no time to retreat from this battle. To everyone's surprise, Qutayba responded, and he wasn't as angry as they had imagined. For a moment, let alone Abu Muslim and Osman, even Ibak was dumbfounded. After calming down from his excitement, Ibak's back was drenched in cold sweat. This battle is far from over. I've already injured that old man from the east, and I've already discovered a flaw in his body. There's a major problem with his body that makes him unable to fight for long. Qutayba coldly said. Everyone was stunned by Qutayba's words. They had all seen just how powerful that black-robed elder of the Tang dynasty was. He could control the energy of the world for his own use, and he could even fight evenly with Qutayba. If not for his existence, given Qutayba's strength, this battle would have ended differently, and there would have been no conflict and debate in the tent. The failure of that final ambush was inextricably linked to this. If the one attacking the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner had been Qutayba and not Osman, the army might have already won. Everyone turned to Qutayba, and only now did they realize that Qutayba had been thinking this entire time. In tomorrow's battle, I will personally kill him, Qutayba sternly said. Abu Muslim's brow creased, and the mood in the tent turned strange. Osman had been heavily injured in the previous battle, and his soldiers had suffered grievous losses. This was why he had wanted to retreat, but now that Qutayba had said that he wanted to continue the battle, Osman's situation instantly became strange. In his current condition he could neither leave nor stay. Reporting. At this moment, an Arab messenger came from outside the tent, his head lowered and a respectful expression on his face, as he hurriedly strode into the tent. Reporting to Milord, the Uzun and the Western Turks request an audience. The tent instantly fell silent. Abu Muslim hesitated for a moment, then quickly said, "That's right." After a moment of hesitation, Abu Muslim quickly said, "Invite them in." In this battle, the Arabs, the Uzun and the Western Turks had all suffered grievous losses. Although everyone had been rather critical of the Uzun and the Western Turks at the start, the Uzun and the Western Turks had used their actions to prove themselves and win the respect of the Arabs. Moreover, in the current situation, there was no need to bicker with the Uzun and the Western Turks. Whoosh! In a gust of cold wind, the curtain to the tent was opened. Dalawan Ruozan led the way, followed by Huishu Wazong, Dusong Mangpoj and Dawusili. Lord Governor Lord Qutayba, everyone greetings. Chapter 1132. Prime Minister. For what business do you have visiting me so late at night? Abu Muslim almost imperceptibly creased his brow. Although he did not dislike Dalawan Ruozan and Uzun, the Arabs were still the Arabs, and the Uzun were the Uzun. This was why he had not invited Dalawan Ruozan to his meetings. Haha, I have troubled Lord Governor's concern. Dalawan Ruozan will not stand on courtesy. Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled, his eyes sweeping over the people in the tent, as if they were the back of his hand. If Dalawan Ruozan's guess is correct, Lord Governor is preparing to break camp and withdraw to the west, returning to Arabia and retreating to Samarkand. The tent instantly fell silent. To have one's thoughts seen through in front of a group of outsiders was truly not a very comfortable thing. Correct. We do have this plan, but this war is already over. Even if we stay here, we might not be able to defeat the Tang people. Abu Muslim straightforwardly declared. At this stage of the battle, there was no need to hide anything. Haha, is it because we don't have enough soldiers? Dalawan Ruozan said, his face relaxed and carefree. Not entirely, but this is also one of the reasons. With our current soldiers, we simply can't break the enemy's formation. Staying here will only increase the number of casualties. Abu Muslim calmly said. To be honest, he was rather confused as to why Dalawan Ruozan had come so late at night and suddenly asked him this question. But he managed to restrain himself. He had some understanding of Dalawan Ruozan, and he knew that this Uzun was known for his intelligence and schemes. There had to be a reason for his words. But what Abu Muslim didn't know and was even rather curious, was what this Uzun Prime Minister wanted at this stage of the battle. Could it be that the Tsimpo of Uzun had suddenly decided to mobilize all his forces? However, didn't Uzun have no soldiers to use now? If that's all, Dalawan Ruozan has a way to help the governor break the formation. I thought that Lord Governor didn't need to be in such a hurry to evacuate. Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled. Buzz. Hearing Dalawan Ruozan's words, the atmosphere in the tent changed abruptly, and everyone shuddered. Ibak, Osman, Abu Muslim, Ziad, and even the governor of war Qutayba seemed to be moved, all of them turning to Dalawan Ruozan. No one paid much attention to the leader of the Uzun people. However, if he could resolve the other party's formation, then everything would be different. Hihi. Dalawan Ruozan grinned, apparently having predicted the reaction of the Arab generals. In terms of understanding the Tang dynasty, no one could compare to him. What method do you have? A cold and aloof voice rang out in his ear. This time Qutayba took the initiative to speak. Lord Qutayba, I know that you are most troubled by that black-robed elder of the Tang dynasty. In truth, I have a way to help you deal with him, but I will need your help. Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled. Bang! Everyone in the tent was stunned by these words, and even Qutayba couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Even someone as proud and conceited as Qutayba had to admit that the black-robed elder possessed the most strength he had ever seen in his life. For these Uzun people to say that they could deal with this black-robed elder was simply unbelievable. Dusong Mangpoj, bring out the things. Dalawan Ruozan took note of everyone's reactions, but he said nothing and gestured to Dusong Mangpoj in the back. A moment later, clang. Dusong Mangpoj strode forward and placed a small golden bell the size of a fist on the table, its surface covered in complex and mysterious carvings. The bell vibrated, giving off a pleasant tinkle. The sight of this bell caused all the Arabs in the tent to look at it in confusion. What is this? Ibak couldn't help but ask, breaking the silence. This is a secret ritual tool of our Great Snow Mountain Temple. It has a history of nearly 1,000 years. No matter how powerful an opponent is, it can trap them, Dalawan Ruozan said. As he spoke, he gestured to Dusong Mangpoj behind him. Bang! The latter understood, and suddenly stepped forward to cast a spell. There was an earth-shattering boom, and in the next moment, under everyone's gaze, the fist-sized golden bell suddenly rose into the air and floated more than 10 feet above the ground. At the same time, a majestic, terrifying, volcanic energy erupted from the bell like a storm, enveloping the entire tent. Thump, thump, thump. In a flash, everyone grimaced and unleashed all their energy to resist the dreadful power of the golden bell. But even the powerful Abu Muslim, Ibak, and the others were forced back by this destructive power. Not only that, but just as they were going all out against the golden bell, everyone heard a series of ear-piercing metallic clangs. A second later, the table made of deep-sea Xian metal, which Ibak had left a palm print on, was suddenly pulled up by an enormous suction force and began to twist. In the blink of an eye, it had been twisted into a dough twist. At the same time, the deep-sea Xian iron table was reduced to countless bits of metal that rained down from the sky. Whoosh! In a flash, a broad and powerful palm reached out. The golden bell seemed to lose all its strength and powerlessly fell into the palm, where Dusong Mangpoj grasped it. My lack of manners. Dusong Mangpoj didn't care if the other side understood him or not. He immediately put away the bell and retreated behind Dalawan Ruozan. The storm left as quickly as it had come. Once the power of the bells faded, everything returned to normal, but the tent was riddled with holes. Even Ibak and the others were in disarray, their figures rather ragged. Everyone had been rather skeptical at first, thinking that Dalawan Ruozan was exaggerating, but now they were somewhat convinced. Everyone has already seen the power of this ritual tool, and this is only its first layer. If it were to unleash its full power, the place where we are standing right now would be scorched earth. In addition, our strength alone isn't enough to use this ritual tool. Lord Qutayba and that black-robed elder are simply too powerful. We simply can't get close, so we naturally can't use this ritual tool. Thus, We will need Lord Kataba's cooperation to create an opportunity for us. Dalawan Ruozan scanned the people in the tent and sternly said. All of them fell silent at Dalawan Ruozan's words. Anyone who had seen the battle between Kataba and the evil emperor would never doubt Dalawan Ruozan's words. Their strength was simply too strong. The energy that erupted from the two of them and the sandstorm that was triggered reached the heavens and the earth. It was filled with terrifying destructive power. Even an imperial great general would shrink back in the face of this power. They would probably be heavily injured by the shockwaves of their battle before they could even get close. Okay. Kataba gave a rare response. A smile finally appeared on Dalawan Ruozan's face at these two words. There's one more thing. Dalawan Ruozan still has a plan that can turn defeat into victory. But this matter also requires the cooperation of all of you. As long as we can obtain your assistance, Dalawan Ruozan is confident that we will be able to obtain the final victory. And all of you can return in triumph. There's no need to retreat to Samarkand. In front of everyone, Dalawan Ruozan explained his plan from beginning to end. Everyone in the tent had originally been rather reserved about Dalawan Ruozan's words. But after hearing his words, even Governor Osman of Cairo, who was heavily injured and wanted to retreat the most, could not help but feel invigorated. Prime Minister, is this true? If it really is as you say and this plan succeeds, then victory is assured. Osman clenched his fists as he spoke. Dalawan Ruozan silently smiled. Everyone in the tent had relaxed expressions, and the silence from before had been swept away. Let's discuss the specifics of the battle plan. Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled. With a flick of his wrist, he took out the map of the continent and unfurled it on the table. Abu Muslim, Osman, Ibak, and even Kataba walked over, all of them participating in the discussion. Previously, there had been some estrangement between the three sides, but now the generals of Uzan, the Western Turks, and the Arabs had gathered together and were truly working together. While Dalawan Ruozan was discussing the details of the battle plan, in the main hall of Talas, Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Banahan, and the King Gonka were all gathered, and the atmosphere was tense. The Eagle team has already sent word that the Arabs have still not retreated. They clearly haven't given up on the attack. Once they reorganize and stabilize their ranks, they'll definitely come back. The hall was brightly lit. Shi Yuanqing slammed his palm on the table and said with a solemn expression. Everyone else in the hall was also a little nervous. What's there to be afraid of? If we could defeat them once, we can defeat them twice. I don't believe that with the 9-Dragon Blood War banner, we can still fear them. Lu Shi angrily said, his face red. Shi, this matter isn't that simple. You also heard Lord Wang's words. Venerable Senior Zhang is not in a good condition. His body can't endure prolonged battle, and we can only hope that Kataba's side hasn't realized this. Moreover, we don't even know if the Arabs have any reinforcements. As long as Kataba isn't eliminated, he will always be an enormous threat to us. Chapter 1133. Qianli is correct. In this battle, the Arabs still have around 100,000 soldiers, still outnumbering us. In addition, although we didn't suffer many losses in this battle, the ballista army has used up most of its ballista bolts. Without enough ballista bolts, the ballista army will find it very difficult to display their power. Gao Xianji's words were extremely tactful. Although the Tang dynasty still had more than 50,000 soldiers, 25,000 of them were ballista soldiers. These ballista soldiers were all bandits and highwaymen of the Silk Road. Although Su Hanshan's training had greatly transformed them, their fighting strength was still lacking. It was simply impossible for them to engage in close combat with the elite cavalry of the Great Tang. In other words, the Tang dynasty only had less than 30,000 soldiers at its disposal. 30,000 against a true army of 100,000. The Great Tang was still not in a very good position. Su Han, how many ballista bolts have you collected from the battlefield? Wang Chong suddenly turned to Su Han. We only have around 7,000 ballista bolts that haven't been used yet. Although our people are still collecting ballista bolts from the battlefield, a significant portion of these ballista bolts have been damaged. The arrowheads have been blunted, or the bolts have been warped. I've already had Senior Zhang Shouji repair them, but I'm worried that there won't be enough time. Su Hanshan sternly said. Repairing the bolts would take time, but with the war imminent, the Arabs probably wouldn't give the Tang dynasty enough time to repair the ballista bolts. And 7,000 ballista bolts were clearly not enough to intimidate the Arabs. In truth, given our numbers, if we take a defensive stance and wait for the Arabs to attack, they'll definitely attack, and we can use the walls to defend. We might even be able to deal another heavy blow to them. Of the 400,000 Arabs, only around 100,000 remain. This is truly a grievous loss. They should be the ones who are more worried, not us. The Ferganan chief, Banahan, suddenly stepped forward. Although the Ferganan tribe had suffered grievous losses in this battle, Banahan was extremely confident in the Tang dynasty. What Ferhan lost was only temporary, but what he gained was long-term benefits. The nomadic tribes on the prairie and the farming tribes on the central plains had completely different views on life and death. As a mercenary warrior, dying in such a great war was the most honorable ending for a warrior. Moreover, if the Farahan tribe could prosper in the future, everything would be worth it. It's not that simple. The crux of this battle is not the 100,000 Arab soldiers, nor is it their comeback, but Qutayba. If we can't kill Qutayba, it doesn't matter if we use defense as offense or offense as defense. He only needs one strike to destroy all of our defenses. Suddenly a voice came from the side. The king of Gonka took a few steps forward and suddenly spoke. He seemed very worried. As the leader of the Gonka people, the personality of the king of Gonka, as well as his learning experience in the Middle Kingdom, allowed him to see the essence of things with a single glance. The moment the king of Gonka spoke, the hall fell so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone seemed to be lost in thought. There was no need to doubt Qutayba's strength. He was like a mountain weighing down on everyone's heads, making it hard for them to breathe. If this problem was not resolved, the Tang dynasty would find it very difficult to truly win, because Qutayba and Abu Muslim could gather their soldiers and come back again and again. If this threat was not removed, the Tang dynasty would never be at peace, and Talas could fall at any moment. Everyone in the hall was racking their brains, but martial arts were different from strategy. There was no such thing as technique, only a head-on clash of fists and flesh. Defeating Qutayba was easier said than done. Gradually, everyone began to frown, and their frowns deepened. Even Wang Chong was the same. His eyes swept over the sand table again and again. On the sand table, sand hills, peaks, plains, castles, and even the dark forest in the distance could be seen clearly. Wang Chong had studied this map of Talas countless times, so he knew everything like the back of his hand. But when Wang Chong's gaze swept over the city of Talas, he suddenly had an idea. Lord Gao, General Cheng, I have a method that might be able to kill Qutayba. Wang Chong raised his head and said. Wang Chong's simple words were like a stone stirring up 1,000 ripples. His simple words were like a fierce gale, stirring up massive waves in the hearts of the crowd. Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, and even the king of Gonka and Su Hanshan all looked at Wang Chong. All of them had expressions of extreme shock in their eyes. Everything could be balanced with intelligence, but not with strength. If Wang Chong really could kill Qutayba, then there was nothing to worry about. Whether it was Abu Muslim, Aibak, Uzan, or the Western Turks, none of them were a match for the Tang dynasty. I have around a 50% chance of success, but I still need everyone's cooperation and agreement. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong voiced the daring idea in his mind. Buzz. Although Wang Chong had only said a few words, his plan caused massive waves to surge through the minds of everyone present. Even the most daring person would be shocked speechless by his bold and imaginative ideas for a long time. The king of Gonka, Banahan, Shi Yuanqing, and Lu Shi all stared in shock at Wang Chong. Madness. To madness. Lord Protector General, if you hadn't said this, I would have definitely believed that person to be a madman. Shi Yuanqing couldn't help but say. Shi Yuanqing had interacted with Wang Chong before, but even Shi Yuanqing found the current Wang Chong rather unfamiliar. This sort of madness and boldness was enough to leave a deep impression on anyone. Although Shi Yuanqing had heard all sorts of legends about Wang Chong, seeing for himself was not as good as hearing about it. Wang Chong's daring were even more astonishing than the legends made him out to be. Although it's crazy, this plan is feasible, isn't it? Cheng Qianli suddenly said after a few moments of thought. And we truly don't have a better plan at the moment. General Cheng's words are reasonable. This one also believes that Lord Protector General's plan is feasible. Guli couldn't help but step forward. It was rare for him to add a word to this military conference. Wang Chong, let's do as you say. As for everything else, I will take care of it. At this moment, a voice rang out in everyone's ears. Gao Xianji suddenly spoke, giving the final word. If the Arabs attack, this will be our only chance. With these final words, Gao Xianji's eyes swept over everyone in the hall. Everyone quickly reached an agreement. In all of Talas, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji had the highest status. If these two commanders could reach an agreement, there would naturally be no more questions. Since there are no objections, let's begin. Gao Xianji glanced at everyone, then gathered them together, and began to discuss the details of the battle plan. Time flew by, and the final battle that everyone had expected came much faster than they had expected. Rumble. Dust churned, and the earth quaked as tens of thousands of warhorses surged forward. By daybreak, the last 100,000 Arab, Uzan and Western Turkic soldiers had reached the battlefield of Talas. When they were still 7,000 to 8,000 zhang from the first defense line, they stopped. They came so quickly. Behind the high steel walls, Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Wang Yan, and the evil emperor stood side by side. As they gazed at the incoming wave of Arab soldiers, a cold light flashed through their eyes. The sky was overcast and seemed ready to collapse at any moment. From their vantage point, they could see a dense sea of Arab, Tibetan, and Western Turkic soldiers on the other side of Talas. Even though they had suffered heavy losses yesterday, they still had not been able to defeat Talas. Even though they had suffered heavy losses yesterday, the three armies still had 100,000 soldiers left, and they were lined up on the battlefield with an astonishing momentum. And in the middle of this vast army of cavalry, those 6 war banners fluttering in the wind still gave off an enormous impression. The war horses uneasily whinnied, seemingly ready to charge at any moment. For a moment, the mood was extremely solemn. From last night, when the Arabs had stopped several dozen li away, everyone knew that the Arabs would return sooner or later. But no one had expected them to arrive at the battlefield so quickly. This meant that they had made their decision last night, and had begun their march in the middle of the night. This was an astonishing efficiency, and the resolve of the Arabs, Uzan and Western Turks could be seen for all to see. Ready! A loud and clear voice resounded through the sky. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud creaking sound as the crossbow bolts were quickly loaded onto the bowstring and pushed into the rifling of the ballista. The sharp tips of these bolts were aimed at the distant army of the three armies. All the ballista soldiers appeared calm, but they were actually extremely nervous. Only they knew that they only had 7,000 some ballista bolts left. Each ballista could only fire once. Their opponents this time were far too powerful, and all their armor was of the highest quality. Coupled with the sheer number of soldiers, the ballista bolts had been consumed far more than they had imagined. The mountainous amount of crossbow bolts had actually been completely used up. This was something that no one had ever imagined before they set off. Once they ran out of ballista bolts, no one dared to imagine what would happen to the Arab army. But when they turned to look at that aloof figure behind them, they once more calmed down. As ballista soldiers who had participated in an important battle like the Battle of Talas, all of them understood that they were unqualified. They were just bandits and brigands of the Silk Road, who relied on plundering to make a living. Chapter 1134. In the battles of the Biting Protectorate, the Chishi Protectorate, and now, at the Battle of Talas, Su Hanshan had always been at the forefront, fighting alongside everyone else. Although they were of lowly status, Su Hanshan had always been willing to argue on their behalf. In Su Hanshan's heart, they were not subordinates but brothers. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. Suhan's Han treated them as his brothers, and they all treated Suhan's Han as their brother and family. As long as he did not retreat, they would not make a sound, even if their heads were chopped off. Everyone get ready. Boom! Once all the ballista soldiers were in position, a large banner was thrust into the ground, shattering countless layers of rock. The black armored guard gripped the 9-dragon blood war banner as he slowly advanced from the rear of the army. The moment the black armored guard moved out, the heavens began to change color. Around the black armored guard, the divine martial army, the divine prison army, the dragon stallion army, the best cavalry of the Tang dynasty began to advance according to a special formation. An enormous oppressive force surged out like a tide. The appearance of the 9-dragon blood war banner and the best soldiers of the Tang dynasty caused the air to grow tense. Even the Arab soldiers on the other side of the battlefield began to show nervous expressions. Yesterday's battle was still fresh in their minds, and the army they were facing was the most terrifying killing machine in the world. Gallop! Gallop! As the mood on the battlefield grew tenser and tenser, the clattering of hooves came from the distance. This sudden development immediately attracted everyone's attention. As the Arab army parted, a figure mounted on a spotlessly white Highland steed rode out from beneath the 6 massive war banners. Dalawan Ruozhen. Wang Chong's eyes widened in recognition. At almost the same time, Dalawan Ruozhen pulled on the reins of his horse, his wise and profound eyes sweeping over Talas before settling on Wang Chong atop the white-hoofed shadow. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, do you dare come forward? Dalawan Ruozhen's eyes flashed as his loud voice came from the western side of the battlefield. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji glanced at each other, then pulled on the reins of their horses and walked out from behind the tall steel walls. On the other side, Abu Muslim saw Gao Xianji walk out from beneath the black Arab war banner. Without waiting for Dalawan Ruozhen to speak, he urged his horse forward. The 4 main instigators of the Battle of Talas stared at each other on the battlefield, the mood instantly turning strange. Dalawan Ruozhen, we've already fought to this point. Have you still not given up? Wang Chong rode on the white-hoofed shadow as he stared at Dalawan Ruozhen. The breeze caused Wang Chong's hair to dance in the wind. After one battle after another, Wang Chong's eyes were filled with determination, completely different from before. If one didn't know the ins and outs of this battle, no one would have believed that one of the commanders of this enormous battle would be a 17-year-old youth. Ha ha ha, the winner is king, and the loser is in the wrong. This battle is still not over. Until the final moment, who can say who will be the victor, and who will be the loser? Dalawan Ruozhen sighed. You won't have the chance, and we won't give you the chance. Dalawan Ruozhen, Uzun has already lost. Even if you collude with the Arabs and form another alliance, what's the point? You'll only lose more miserably. Gao Xianji's voice came from the side. Gao Xianji didn't know much about Dalawan Ruozhen, nor had they interacted much, but there was no doubt that Dalawan Ruozhen had been a crucial figure in this battle. If not for him, the Tang dynasty and Arabia's war would not have been so complicated. At the very least, in the first phase, the Tang dynasty would not have had to face enemies from both front and back. Moreover, several of Uzun's imperial great generals posed an enormous threat to the Tang dynasty. One could say that it was precisely Dalawan Ruozhen's ambition that had caused each side to suffer grievous losses. At this point in the battle, although the Tang dynasty had managed to defeat the 3-sided alliance, the Tang dynasty, the Arabs, Uzun, and the Western Turks had all suffered grievous losses. Haha, Protector General Gao, don't be so confident. Until the final moments of this battle, how can you know that the Tang dynasty will be the final victor? Wang Chong, in the War of the Southwest, I lost to you with 400,000 soldiers, and in this war, I command nearly 500,000 soldiers. How about we make a bet before this final battle? The first part of Dalawan Ruozhen's words was directed at Gao Xianji, but the last part was directed at Wang Chong. In his mind, he had always been brooding over the War of the Southwest, and he would never be able to forget Wang Chong, who had stood at Gao Xianji's side. If not for Wang Chong, Dalawan Ruozhen would still be the high-spirited prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage. If not for Wang Chong, Dalawan Ruozan would not have been defeated again and again, ending up at Talas and submitting to the Arabs, hoping to use the Arabs to defeat the Tang dynasty. As a ruthless and ambitious person, how could he be so subservient? A bet. Wang Chong's eyes narrowed, and his heart began to thump. He could sense a special meaning in Dalawan Ruozan's voice. What do you want to bet? Haha. This will be the final battle between us, so why don't we make an agreement? Until one side is completely defeated and all its soldiers are exhausted, neither side is allowed to retreat. And the losing side will never be able to leave their country, much less enter the territory of the other side. What do you say? With these words, Dalawan Ruozan's eyes suddenly turned sharp. Of course, you can also refuse. The entire battlefield was eerily still as everyone looked at Wang Chong. Even Gao Xianji. Wang Chong said nothing, only sized up Dalawan Ruozan. Dalawan Ruozan was calm and unruffled, a faint smile on his lips. It seemed like he wasn't worried that Wang Chong would not agree. Ha! As you wish, Wang Chong said without hesitation. Whether it was the Tang dynasty or the Arabs, there was no way out. Dalawan Ruozan's words were not meant for Wang Chong, but for himself. There was no question that he had already made up his mind to fight to the death with the Tang dynasty. Thus, whether Wang Chong agreed or not made no difference to Dalawan Ruozan. Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan were mortal enemies. Sooner or later, a victor would be decided, either in life or in death. The moment Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan finished their conversation, Abu Muslim spoke. Unlike Dalawan Ruozan, he only had eyes for Gao Xianji. This long war had begun because of the two of them, and in the end, it would end with the two of them. Gao Xianji, how about we also make an agreement? If the Arabs lose this battle, I will immediately lead the army west, return to Khorasan, and spend the rest of my life there. For 10 years, the Arabs will not set foot in Talas, much less covet the Central Plains. And if you lose, if the Tang dynasty loses this battle, this Gao will retreat wherever the Arab soldiers go and never make an enemy of Arabia. Before Abu Muslim could finish speaking, Gao Xianji had already spoken in a forceful voice. Okay, it's a deal. Abu Muslim's eyes flashed as he turned his horse around and rode back to the army. If Dalawan Ruozan's mortal enemy was Wang Chong, then Abu Muslim's mortal enemy was Anshi Protector General Gao Xianji. The two had been fighting for 3 or 4 months. And even now, Abu Muslim had to admit that Gao Xianji was the strongest and most troublesome foe he had ever faced in his life. Even if he couldn't kill Gao Xianji in this battle, this gambling duel was enough to cripple a powerful imperial great general of the Tang dynasty and remove a powerful foe for the Arabs. Let's go. Gao Xianji called out to Wang Chong, and also began to retreat. Regardless of the outcome of this battle, the Tang dynasty and Arabia would never have a new war. It was obvious that both the Tang dynasty and Arabia were tired of this protracted war. Both sides had decided that this would be the final decisive battle between the 4 sides. Ready! A loud shout in Arabic came from the distance, and soon, the horns began to blare. The mood in the army instantly became somber and somber. At the same time, clang! A fierce sword chi flew through the air as all the Tang soldiers behind the defense line unsheathed their swords. Huh! The winds howled and sand and pebbles flew as the battle began at any moment. Kill! After what seemed like both a second and like countless eons, the 100,000 Arab, Uzan, and Western Turkic soldiers surged forward like a flood, charging at the first defense line of the Tang dynasty. Bang! The earth rumbled, and a violent sound rang out in everyone's ears. 4 black Arab war banners, 1 white yak banner of the Uzan, and 1 black wolf war banner of the Western Turks rose from the ground and began to gallop toward the Tang dynasty. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed drastically. Qutayba and the others are personally moving out, Gao Xianji solemnly said as he looked forward. The Arabs had adopted a completely different strategy this time. Before, the Arabs had always sent their soldiers first, only sending out their great generals at the very end. But now, everything was different. Before the battle had even begun, all the great generals of the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks had moved out. From afar one could see Qutayba, Abu Muslim, Ibak, Ziad, Osman, Huashu Wazong, and Dawusili. Behind them, the 6 moving flags followed them like shadows. There was no doubt that the 3 empires had burned their boats and staked everything on a single throw. They had thrown all their strength into this battle, determined to succeed or die trying. Chapter 1136. At the start, they wouldn't have cared at all. Not even the most formidable great general could contend against so many Tang dynasty soldiers. But everything had changed. A mere 30,000 some elite soldiers, and 25,000 some bandits could not stop 8 great generals. Their target is the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. Let's move out as well. Wang Yin suddenly said as he looked at the direction in which the 6 huge flags were moving. Leave Qutayba to me, the black-robed demonic emperor old man suddenly said. Leave Abu Muslim to me. Gao Xianji immediately added. Then I'll go deal with Ziad. Cheng Qianli narrowed his eyes. Then leave Dawusili and Ibak to me. Wang Chong said a few moments later. Everyone's expressions flickered at these words. Other than individuals on Qutayba's level, there was not much of a gap between great generals. But for Wang Chong to fight one against 2 great generals at peak condition was simply unbelievable. But a moment later, everyone returned to normal, and no one asked any more questions. The tactical arrangements were quickly completed, and everyone had their own opponents to deal with. Dusong Mangpoj, do you still remember our previous plan? This time we can't allow any mistakes. Everything must be carried out according to the strict plan. In the rear of the army, Dalawan Ruozan gazed at the roiling dust and the 6 banners. His eyes were narrowed, and his expression was extremely grave. Understood. Dusong Mangpoj slightly turned his head, his voice much lower. He knew what Dalawan Ruozan was talking about. Dalawan Ruozan had originally arranged for him to deal with Wang Chong. But when Ibak appeared to stop Wang Chong, Dusong Mangpoj had not gone to find the other generals. Instead, he had gone to where the evil emperor and Qutayba were fighting. It was precisely because of this that the army was defeated in the end. If Dusong Mangpoj and Osman had worked together to deal with the black armored guard holding the banner of the Tang dynasty, perhaps everything would have been different. Don't worry, there will be no mistakes this time. Dusong Mangpoj seriously said. No matter what, I must take revenge. Not only for myself, but also for Dayan Mangpoj. Dusong Mangpoj muttered these last words to himself, his voice so low that no one could hear him. Hiya! Dusong Mangpoj quickly galloped forward, leaving a trail of dust in his wake, as he caught up to the army. This is truly a single battle, whether or not they can defeat the Tang dynasty, and when the final battle of Talas will depend on their performance. Dalawan Ruozan quietly said to himself, as he watched Qutayba and Abu Muslim depart. The chessboard had been laid out, the pieces placed, and all the strategies had been properly arranged. In this war between the Great Tang and Arabia, only one side could survive. There would be no more battles. Only one side would survive, and the other would perish. As the 2 sides got closer and closer, the earth quaked and mountains swayed as enormous figures rose from the ground. Cheng Qianli, Wang Yin, and Wang Chong were using the famous god battle art of the Tang dynasty. 3 enormous gods, the mighty miracle god, the supreme desolation god, and the flame devil god, swiftly appeared before everyone's eyes. That huge body gave people a great impact and pressure. 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, 5,000 feet. As the distance got closer and closer, the pressure grew greater and greater. The intense aura of battle was so thick that it made one's scalp go numb. Crackle! When the 2 sides were only 5,000 feet apart, a golden bolt of sword chi cut through the gloomy sky like a bolt of lightning, opening the curtains to this battle. Rumble! Origin energy surged in from all around, condensing into a mountainous azure palm that blocked Qutayba's lightning-fast attack. Without the slightest hesitation, the demonic emperor old man flew into the air and began to battle with Qutayba. At almost the same time, Gao Xianji and Cheng Qianli found their own opponents. But far ahead of the rest, there was one person who had moved much faster. Dawusili, I trust you've been well since we last met. How is my cultivation of formation phenomena coming along? Wang Chong stepped forward and looked down at Dawusili, Foul brat, don't get carried away. Once I twist off your head and shove it into the mud, you'll know how to speak in front of me. Wuxia rode his pitch-black steed through the air, his black cape flapping in the wind. His eyes were cold and brimming with killing intent. Everyone knows that you, Wuxia, have a crafty and cowardly personality. I hope that you'll be a little bolder this time, and won't flee so quickly or so far. Wang Chong grinned. Bastard. Wuxia was infuriated by these words. There was no doubt that Wang Chong was mocking him. In his battle with Chief Wuxiang, he had fled without a fight. Since you like to spout nonsense so much, I'll tear your mouth apart. In addition, let me tell you what true formation phenomena are. At the last sentence, Wuxia's eyes suddenly became extremely fierce. Soldiers had been trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Although Wuxia's formation phenomena had come from Wang Chong, and even though Wang Chong's soldiers had been able to easily destroy the formation phenomena, Wuxia had still gained a great deal from this formation phenomena. He had integrated his lifetime of experience into this formation phenomena and raised it to a higher level, surpassing Wang Chong's previous formation phenomena and reaching a higher level. This was also the reason why Wuxia was not afraid of Wang Chong's challenge. Rumble! An enormous energy exploded out of Wuxia's body, stabbing into the air like a sharp sword. In a flash, energy began to gather from all around, flowing like electricity from the bodies of the Western Turkic horsemen to Wuxia's dantian. Wuxia, who had already been at the peak of the great general level, was pushed even higher by this energy, reaching an astonishing level. But then with a peal of thunder, clouds began to churn above Wuxia, and in the blink of an eye, a thunderstorm had appeared. Countless tiny bolts of lightning crackled within the thunderstorm, and the thunderstorm resonated with the energy in Wuxia's body. This bastard truly is formidable. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but praise at this sight. The formation phenomena that Wang Chong had given to Wuxia should have been a technique that could only be used by cavalry, and it was a formation martial art meant for large armies. But Wuxia had actually modified it. Even though he was alone, he was able to use the effects of a god formation. Through formation phenomena, he was able to absorb energy from the other Turkic cavalry and strengthen himself. This was something that the original formation phenomena did not possess. But no matter how smart you are, your fate was already decided a long time ago. Wang Chong blinked, his eyes suddenly turning sharp. Everything has a price. Bastard thing, for your arrogance die. Wuxia floated in the air, his expression savage. Tens of thousands of tiny bolts of lightning converged on Wuxia's hand, transforming into a massive ball of lightning. Wuxia gripped his black spear with both hands and poured the ball of lightning into it. Man and horse became one, and like a bolt of lightning, he charged toward Wang Chong. Wang Chong sneered at this sight. Without the slightest hesitation, he swung his Vajra pestle through the air, unleashing a massive wave of energy that rumbled toward Wuxia. Wuxia's spear of lightning and Wang Chong's Vajra pestle collided in the air. With a massive boom, Wang Chong's Vajra pestle of stellar energy snapped in half, and even his massive body was sent staggering backward by Wuxia's impact. Seeing this, Wuxia's lips curled into a sinister smile. The past month hadn't been in vain. Thanks to Wang Chong's formation phenomena, Wuxia's cultivation had advanced to the next level. Now, he could completely suppress this brat who still reeked of his mother's milk. But a moment later, just when Wuxia was preparing to increase the intensity of his attack, a majestic energy came from an unexpected direction and slammed into Wuxia's body. Given Wuxia's strength, he could even block a mountain. However, the moment this force blasted into him, Wuxia's tyrannical stellar energy cracked like paper. The force blasted into his vitals. Arg! Wuxia screamed, and then a horrifying fountain of blood erupted from his body. This dreadful sound made everyone jump in fright. Boom! Wuxia's body smashed into the ground like a cannonball, the enormous force causing a chain of explosions that left a crater in the ground and sent shards flying in every direction. Wuxia's helmet was sent flying more than 100 feet into the ground, his long hair disheveled. Everyone was stunned by this sight. Ziad Huishu Wazong, Dusong Mangpoj, and even Ibak were shocked. Chapter 1137. Every great general was extremely powerful, and a battle between them could not be decided in a short period of time. Not even the combined efforts of Abu Muslim and Osman would be able to heavily injure an existence like Dawusili in a single blow. This surprise had come far too suddenly. This is impossible. In the rear of the army, Dalawan Ruozen's face was completely drained of blood, and even his lips were trembling. Dawusili was a cunning fox, cautious and paranoid. Even when he was sent to deal with the chief of Wuxiang, he had used a feint and then fled. It could be said that he was in the best condition on the battlefield. But even this Dawusili had been beaten into such a state by Wang Chong the moment he stepped onto the field. Dalawan Ruozen's first reaction was that Dawusili was pretending, that he was putting on a show for the others. But Dalawan Ruozen quickly realized that this was really happening. Dawusili really had been heavily injured by Wang Chong. The weak and disorderly aura on his body could not fool anyone, nor could the bloodstains on his body. If this was all an act, then he had used too much strength. Bang! Regardless of what the others were thinking, the moment Dawusili crashed into the ground, Wang Chong rushed forward in pursuit. Like a meteor, he shot toward the plummeting Dawusili. Rumble! The earth quaked as waves of energy swept through the area, stirring up a massive storm. But Wang Chong's confident strike had failed. In a flash of light, Dawusili's body vanished. A few hundred feet away, a crimson glow escaped into the distance at a shocking speed. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. No one can break my formation phenomena. Go! Everyone follow me. Dawusili was as panicked as a stray dog, his voice filled with fear. Wang Chong's palm had completely crushed his courage, and he simply could not understand how someone of his powerful cultivation could have his technique broken by a single palm from Wang Chong. The unknown and confusion filled his heart with fear, and he lost all will to fight it out with Wang Chong. With Dawusili's voice, the remaining Western Turkic soldiers, including Shamshak and Chechen Benba, fell into chaos. With their commander fleeing, the Western Turks had no morale to speak of. All of them madly fled into the distance, their minds filled with fear and confusion. Dawusili's fearful voice was like a plague that infected them. Gallop! A moment later, the Western Turkic soldiers threw caution to the wind and began to flee. Wang Chong was also taken aback by this sight, but he did not pursue. What a pity! After preparing for so long, it was all for naught. It seems like he really isn't fated to die yet. The formation phenomena Wang Chong had given Dawusili had massive flaws, and the deeper the technique, the greater the flaws. Given the level of cultivation that Dawusili had displayed, this problem was extremely serious, though he had not even noticed it. As long as one attacked the Shangyang point on Dawusili's body, no matter how high Dawusili's cultivation was, one would be able to break through all his defenses and strike at his vital point and core, just like what was happening now. No matter what, Dawusili's retreat from this battle, while taking the Celestial Wolf cavalry, and all the Western Turkic cavalry with him, can be considered a success. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong immediately lunged at Ibak. Come Ibak. Let's continue this unfinished battle. Wang Chong's body surged with stellar energy as he lunged at Ibak. Great distortion art. Light gathered on Wang Chong's shoulders, one gold and one red, and the image of a sun and moon appeared. Space blurred as an enormous energy that seemed capable of distorting all things hurtled toward Ibak. This was also the great distortion art, but now that Wang Chong had comprehended the Tao of energy, its power was on a completely different level. This enormous energy tore open countless black cracks in the air, and the suction force imbued within this technique even pulled in the Arab cavalry and their horses. Before these horses could even get close to Ney, their bones began to creak and crack. Both men and horses fell to the ground, blood pouring out of their orifices. Impossible! How did he suddenly get so strong? Even Ibak was flabbergasted by this sight. But there was no time to think. Ruhr! An enormous pharaoh halo appeared behind Ibak, and Ibak, together with this pharaoh halo, fiercely charged at Wang Chang's great distortion art. Boom! With an earth-shattering rumble, the two enormous forces collided violently in the void like comets colliding. In the fierce winds, Wang Chang's body swayed as he took a step back while Ibak staggered back 3 or 4 steps. His throat tightened as he vomited blood, but he quickly swallowed it back down. This is impossible. Ibak's mind was in turmoil, his face ghastly pale. He had already dispelled Wang Chang's heaven god formation. Without the support of the formation, he was able to display the strength of an imperial great general, and he had not used the ocean ring like Ziad had. This was simply inconceivable. A single person could grow this strong in a single night. Ibak, that was then, and this is now. Let us have a decisive battle. Wang Chang looked at Ibak and spoke in Arabic. Rumble. Wang Chang's body transformed once more into the god King Yama, and his Vajra pestle swung through the air like a pillar that could topple mountains and topple jade as it smashed toward Ibak. But this time, it was completely different. Boundless origin energy gathered from all directions and fused into Wang Chang's attack. This was the same strike from the Vajra pestle, supported by the boundless energy of the world, instantly unleashed the power of the 12th layer, perhaps even the 15th layer. This was the transformation that Wang Chang had undergone after piercing through the origin of energy. Boom! With a heaven-shaking boom, even Ibak was forced back several dozen feet by this attack, barely managing to stabilize himself. While Wang Chang and Ibak were engaged in fierce battle, the evil emperor and Kataba, Gao Xinji and Abu Muslim, all of them were engaged in a fierce battle. A few moments later, the soldiers on both sides began to fiercely battle. Kail! Fierce shouts shook the heavens as the nearly 100,000 Arab soldiers crashed into the first defense line like a tidal wave. Release! Su Hanshan's expression was calm and composed as he gave the order. Long ballista bolts immediately shot into the Arab ranks. But this time, it was not 5,000 ballista bolts, but only 1,000. The Great Tang did not have many ballista bolts left. In order to maximize the deterrence of the ballista army, Su Hanshan had arranged the 5,000 ballista carts into 5 rows, with 1,000 ballista carts in each row. Only 1,000 ballista carts would fire in each volley. Although this would reduce the lethality of the ballista carts, it would allow the 7,000 ballista bolts to reach their maximum potential. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Ballista bolts pierced through flesh as row after row of Arab cavalry fell to the ground. In a single volley, 5,000 to 6,000 Arab cavalry had fallen to the ground, blood gushing from their bodies. Su Hanshan's ballista army was not the only target. The elite armies of the Tang dynasty, with the 9-dragon blood war banner at their core, were also under attack. But unlike the ballista army, the elite armies of the 9-dragon blood war banner were taking the initiative to attack the vast sea of Arab cavalry. Advance! With a loud order, the divine prison army raised their long swords and strode out from behind the high iron city walls, in a dense formation. Swish! One sword after another flew through the air in a uniform motion. In a flash, there was a spray of blood, and the neighing of war horses. The charging Arab horsemen were cut through like paper by the sharp swords of the divine prison army, men and horses falling to the ground. Following them were the divine martial army, dragon stallion army, roaring tiger army. All of these armies began to move at a steady and unhurried pace toward the Arab cavalry. Clang, clang, clang. Halos clanged against each other, as the 9-dragon blood war banner caused the energy of the army to swell. These elite infantry of the Great Tang had instantly transformed into the world's most terrifying killing machines. No matter how many soldiers there were, they could not stop their advance. Ah! Kill them! We can't beat them! Run! Screams filled the air as the army fell into chaos. In the face of the 9-dragon blood war banner's formation, the Arab soldiers once more experienced the despair of being ants trying to shake a tree, or a mantis trying to stop a carriage. A moment ago, these Arab soldiers had been brimming with confidence, but now, they were filled with fear. Wave after wave of soldiers were cut down by the seemingly simple swings of the swords of the Tang dynasty. Just when this battle was about to turn into a crushing defeat for the Arabs, the Uzan, and the Western Turks, something completely unexpected occurred. Bang! Bang! Chapter 1138. While Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, the evil emperor, and the chief of Wuxiang were doing all they could to stop Kataba's forces from approaching the Nine Dragon Blood Formation, suddenly, Huashu Wuzong, Dusong Mangpoj, Osman and Ziad had been attacking with all their strength, hoping to break through the Tang dynasty's defenses and break the Nine Dragon Blood Formation. But then, without the slightest hesitation, the four of them gave up on their respective targets and took a blow from the Anqi Protectorate Army behind Cheng Qianli and the infantry behind Wang Yan. The two of them didn't have many soldiers to begin with, and now that they were suddenly attacked by four great generals, they immediately suffered grievous losses. Amidst intense explosions, countless severed limbs flew into the air, and the area behind Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli was immediately covered in corpses. Although the soldiers they had trained were well-trained and experienced, they could not stop the attacks of four great generals. In a flash, the most crucial variable on the battlefield had been born. Buzz! Just as the soldiers behind Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli suffered heavy casualties, a chain reaction occurred like dominoes falling. In the blink of an eye, the light around Cheng Qianli and Wang Yan faded, and the enormous figures of the Supreme Desolation God and the Mighty Miracle God vanished. As for Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli, having lost the support of that enormous energy, they dropped from the sky, their eyes wide with shock. A moment ago, the two of them had been immersed in the massive losses they had suffered, but now, the destruction of the god avatars had left them flabbergasted. Wang Yan, run! Suddenly, a deafening roar rang out. Cheng Qianli's eyes were bloodshot as he shouted. This unforeseen event happened too quickly, and no one had the slightest time to prepare for it. However, in an instant, Cheng Qianli realized that everyone's judgment was wrong. Everyone thought that their target was the Nine Dragon Blood War banner, but no one had expected that their target was not the Nine Dragon Blood War banner, but Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli. In the blink of an eye, the Tang dynasty had lost two great generals. Although Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli were still alive, the God King Yama and the Mighty Miracle God were no more. Success! In a flash, Dalawan Ruozen's eyes flashed with a sharp glint. He clenched his fists tightly, and his expression suddenly became agitated. Although the celestial wolf great general Dewussili had escaped, everything had gone according to his plan. Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli, these two greatest weaknesses of the Tang dynasty, were crucial factors in Dalawan Ruozen's plan, as well as the most important factors in breaking the Tang dynasty and reversing the course of the war. The war had been long and drawn out, and both Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli had led their armies to an extremely dangerous level. The 10 great god formations of the Tang dynasty had a number of soldiers. In order to use the god avatar, one had to command a certain number of soldiers. If the number fell below this number, the god formation would immediately collapse. Unfortunately, both Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli did not notice this, as they were in the midst of the intense battle. And this point had become their greatest Achilles heel. What comes next is extremely important. Everything depends on them. Time was short, and Dalawan Ruozen's face was tinged with anxiety. In this battle, with Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli crippled, the Arabs had gained an enormous advantage. In terms of top-class fighting power, they now had two more great generals. The advantage of these two great generals was enough to threaten the Tang dynasty's Nine Dragon Blood Formation. Regardless of what Dalawan Ruozen was thinking, the moment the Supreme Desolation God and the Mighty Miracle God were destroyed by Dalawan Ruozen, the situation instantly became extremely unfavorable to the Tang dynasty. Father! Wang Chong called out, his eyes turning red. Everything had happened in the blink of an eye, far, far too fast. With the disappearance of the two god avatars, the Tang dynasty's situation rapidly deteriorated. But the danger was only just beginning. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that Huashu Wuzong, Dusong Mangpoj, and Osman had succeeded, and were now attacking Wang Yan together. Even at his peak, Wang Yin wouldn't have been able to hold on against these three great generals, much less now that his god body had been destroyed. Come! Wang Yin was instantly plunged into a perilous situation. But as a famed general, and the descendant of ministers and generals, even in this situation, Wang Yin gripped his sword fearlessly. What joy is there in life, and what fear is there in death? At this moment, Wang Yan's eyes were filled with resolve, his resolve to die. Ha! With a roar, Wang Yin gripped his sword with both hands and leaped forward, slashing at the three great generals. Wang Yin, hand over your life! Huashi Wuzong's eyes were sharp and vicious, his entire body exploding with killing intent. Although Huashi Wuzong had never spoken of the fact that the 200,000 warriors of the Ngari royal lineage had been reduced to ashes in the War of the Southwest, this had always been a source of pain in his heart. Now, he could finally avenge the deaths of his 200,000 soldiers. Bang! In a flash of golden light, Huashi Wuzong transformed into a massive golden Buddha. His fingers clenched into a fist and punched at Wang Yin. At the same time, Osman and Dusong Mangpoch also attacked Wang Yin. In that instant, a gale raged, the earth cracked, and the mountains collapsed. Boundless stellar energy rushed into the void. Just when it seemed like Wang Yin was about to die to the combined attacks of the three great generals, rumble! A powerful ripple of psychic energy caused the heavens to pale. It slammed into Huashi Wuzong's body. Even with Huashi Wuzong's cultivation and the protection of the Vairocana Buddha, all his defensive capabilities had been greatly boosted, but this attack still caused his body to tremble and his movements to momentarily slow. Mirror Art, Blazing Sun. Wang Chong had immediately used the strongest technique he had used against Mazel. Great generals had extremely powerful psychic energy and were as firm as a fortress. Using a psychic energy technique against a great general was extremely difficult, and it would take twice the effort for half the result. Thus, in his previous battles, Wang Chong had rarely used this technique. But now, driven by his madness and rage, Wang Chong had exploded with a level of power that even someone of Huashi Wuzong's abilities couldn't help but groan in shock at the impact of the psychic mirror art. But it was far from over. The moment the psychic energy attack stopped Huashi Wuzong, an enormous energy exploded from Wang Chong's body. Great distortion art. Gusts of wind swayed the heavens and the earth, sending clouds of dust into the air. The images of a sun and a moon appeared on Wang Chong's shoulders. But this time, Wang Chong's great distortion art was not purely for offensive purposes. Instead, it was used as a powerful attractive force aimed at the distant Osman. Buzz! Osman had been charging at Wang Chong, but halfway there, the effects of the great distortion art caused his body to be pulled toward Wang Chong. Even his attack began to twist, drawing an arc toward Wang Chong. How could this be? Osman's soul left his body and turned pale with fright. He had just been heavily injured by the black armored guard, so his strength was nowhere near its peak. He hadn't even reached the level of a great general. If not for the fact that this battle was of utmost importance, he would have never entered the field. And Wang Chong's great distortion art was unbelievably powerful. After Wang Chong comprehended the origin of energy, the power of the great distortion art had risen even further. It had reached a frightening level. Rumble! In the blink of an eye, Osman didn't even have time to think before he was pulled over by that powerful suction force. Their palms collided heavily. It was like a sluice gate had been opened, and the energy in Osman's body madly surged toward Wang Chong. Wang Chong's rage was so powerful that in a single exchange, Osman had been even more injured, losing at least a fifth of his energy. This situation had completely surpassed Osman's imagination. A dragon swimming in shallow water will be toyed with by shrimp. A tiger falling to level ground will be bullied by dogs. At his peak, Osman would have never been able to have so much energy drained from him in a single exchange. But right now, Osman was no match for Wang Chong. Not only that, Osman realized an even more shocking fact. While Wang Chong was using the great distortion art to pull him over, he was also dragging him toward Dusong Mangpoch. Damn bastard! Osman was both shocked and infuriated. He was already heavily injured, and now Wang Chong had drained away a significant portion of his energy. If he was dragged along by Wang Chong and taken a blow from Dusong Mangpoche, the consequences could be easily imagined. If things went wrong, Osman might end up dying here for the rest of his life. Bang! In a flash, a bloody mist exploded from Osman's body, forcefully breaking free of Wang Chong's pull. After escaping Wang Chong's control, Osman transformed into a streak of bloody light that fled like a stray dog. His aura had also begun to rapidly weaken after exploding with that bloody light. Dankarabi's escape. This was the supreme technique of demon god Dankarabi, ranked 69th of the 72 demon god pillars. Dankarabi was ranked 69th of the 72 demon god pillars. From this name alone, one could tell that Dankarabi was not some particularly powerful demon god, but his most powerful technique was the ability to escape. Those demon gods much stronger than Dankarabi had been sealed and suppressed into the deep sea. Only Dankarabi had managed to escape time and time again, constantly escaping from the hands of the angels and gods. In the end, it was only after the vast majority of the demon gods had been sealed that the strength of the angels and gods had been gathered to stop Dankarabi and successfully seal him. One could easily imagine Dankarabi's ability to escape. Osman had expended an enormous amount of energy to obtain this Dankarabi's escape. One had to pay a huge price to use this technique. In a short period of time, Osman had already used this technique twice. Even though he was powerful, he still suffered quite a bit of damage. But compared to the consequences of being heavily injured by Dusong Mangpoche, this was already a very good result. As Osman fled, Wang Chong didn't even glance at him. The moment Dusong Mangpoche attacked, Wang Chong immediately entered the battle between Dusong Mangpoche and his father, using his back to block Dusong Mangpoche's attack and protect his father. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.